Anger boiling over tonight after suspected drug dealers shoot several Houston police officers who were trying to shut down a drug house.
4 officers were shot. A 5th injured his knee. 2 are in critical condition tonight. A bit of good news. One of those officers who was shot in the shoulder is out of the hospital and resting at home tonight.
We have a lot to tell you this evening, and we are covering all the angles, from the tip that led investigators to the house to what we know about the brave officers themselves.
We start with Brett Buffington. He's at the house on Harding Street in Southeast Houston with the very latest tonight. Brett?
And Lynn, tonight here, Harding Street is still shut down. The home where this shooting happened is lit up, and in front of it tonight, a mobile police command center. We now know 18 police officers were tasked with serving a warrant at that home today. 12 of those officers undercover. The suspects inside suspected of dealing black tar heroin. Houston's police chief tonight says the man started shooting as soon as the officers opened the door. In fact, the chief says one of those suspects ran to the back of the home, then came back and started shooting again. 4 of the officers hit by bullets. A 5th hurt while trying to avoid being shot. The 2 suspects, they died here at this home, shot and killed by Houston police officers tonight. 2 of those officers, they have life-threatening injuries. In surgery this evening, both of them shot in the neck. Meanwhile, Mia, here in this neighborhood tonight, it is the beginning of what is sure to be a lengthy investigation.
That is certain. Brett Buffington reporting live. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have the Harris County Sheriff's Department out there, as you said, HPD, obviously. Agents with the ATF are also out there. And we're just trying to gather as much information as we can to pass it along to you. Lauren Tallarico is there on the ground, also trying to gather the latest information. Lauren, have you been able to learn anything new?
Yeah. Well, actually, Ron, I'm here with a woman named Rose who lives in the neighborhood, and she's been gracious enough to tell me a little bit about what she heard earlier. Rose, can you just start from the beginning what we just said? Tell me at what point you realized something was wrong.
When I looked through my back window and I noticed that my neighbor was out here, and then I saw like flashlights, and I knew there was an ambulance and police presence. And so I thought, oh, maybe that was actually gunshots. It's not like a car accident, because, you know, you heard it the first time like, pop, 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 and then you heard it again, and that's not actually like a car accident. So I knew there was something bad happening. So that's when I decided to come along and, you know, come out of my house and see what was happening. And this is what I found out, that some policemen hadn't gotten hurt. So I hope they're okay. That's all I know.
When you weren't scared to come outside, what made you want to come outside?
Because I want to know what's happening. I mean, you know, what if there's the fugitive is out there, and, you know, I want to know. I like to know what's happening around the neighborhood, and I keep good, you know, communication with my neighbors. If I see something out of the ordinary, then, you know, we're like, hey, have you heard this, or did you see this? So, and now it's like, you know, we have that kind of communication. So this is just major. We never seen anything like this since I've been here for over 35 years.
Miss Rose, can you explain that? What is this community typically like?
It's a family, you know, because I have grandkids and I take care of my grandkids, so I'm always up and about. And it's a very close neighborhood, and, you know, we take good care of each other, and it's been peaceful for the past couple of years. It's been, you know, I know there was an accident about maybe, you know, an incident a couple of 10 years ago, but nothing like this. Yeah, so.
And what if, as far as, can you just describe to people what it looks like right now, what your neighborhood, the roads surrounding your home are like?
I mean, it's crazy. It's like the blocks are, you know, the streets are blocked, and I'm surely there was a lot of school buses that were dropping off kids, and now they have to walk.
Yeah. You
know, which is understandable, because, you know, this is some big issue, you know, police getting hurt. And so.
And what is the school right near here?
It's South May Elementary, Mulvey High School is around here, and then Sanchez is on the other side of the Gulf Freeway.
Okay. That is an excellent point, because, you know, actually we have seen a couple of kids walking through with parents. Apparently they're not able to get through this area. So if you do have kids that go to school in the area and you don't know where they are, it's probably because they haven't been able to get through these roads. So many roads are blocked. Thank you, Miss Rose.
And we're being told 5 officers have been shot. Let's go back live to Memorial Herman. That's where the officers are being taken to the medical center. Matt Doherty standing by live there for us with an update. Matt.
Yeah, just a quick update on where we're at right now. So far there have been 2 ambulances that were brought inside here to Memorial Hermann Hospital. 2 life flight helicopters have landed within the last half hour here at Memorial Hermann Hospital. We are learning from one of the officers they are expecting a 3rd ambulance to be arriving here at the hospital at any time now. You see several of these officers have started to line the streets to try to direct traffic. However, they have blocked off much of this block all the way up to Fannin and past that as well. You can see this stretch of the road is completely cleared at this point. They've stopped all traffic on 288 from what we understand as well. So you're not going to see any traffic coming through here in the zoo medical center area for quite some time, I would expect. Again, we're waiting for that 3rd ambulance to arrive here any moment from what we understand from one of the officers. We have not been able to see any of these officers inside of the ambulances, so we do not know what their conditions are at this point. There is a total, as we have been reporting from the very beginning of this, 5 officers who were injured, who were shot in all of this. So far, there have been 2 ambulances that have arrived here, 2 life flight helicopters. We're still waiting for that 3rd ambulance. Guys, back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Matt Doherty, live there on the ground at Memorial Hermann Hospital, giving you the latest on what we know about the officers being transported there. 4 officers have been transported there so far. Again, we're waiting for the 5th. Well, Tiffany Craig has been looking into what we know so far and what we don't know, what's true and what's not, verifying as much information as we can. She's in the studio right now. Tiffany, what can you tell us?
Yeah, you can tell just by the scene how incredibly massive it is and how many people are involved out there gathering information along with the mayor and the chief, who obviously we'll hear from in a little bit. But here in our newsroom, we have a Verify team that kind of takes a step back and looks at all the information that's coming into the newsroom, and we figure out exactly where that information is coming from. We confirm it so we can tell you and you know that it's true. And so I'm going to show you what we have on this board right now, because we do have some information that we can put in some of our different categories. The first one that we've been reporting for quite some time now is that 5 officers have been shot. That information came to us from HPD Watch Command. 5 officers, again, from HPD Watch Command. Also from the Watch Command, 3 suspects involved in this particular case. Could there be more? We don't know. But what we do know at this point is that 1 suspect has been killed. That information, again, from Watch Command, but also from the mayor's office. So again, 3 suspects involved. That suggests that there are perhaps 2 suspects still inside. And in fact, that information has been confirmed as well. So 1 suspect has been killed and 2 are still inside. So a very active scene that's going on, which is why there's so much activity out there right now. One of the things that's in this middle column that we're still working to get more information on is the condition of the officers. 5 officers in the hospital. There's a lot of information coming out. Right now, though, we're going to leave this section in the middle because we don't know. We don't know how they're doing, but because the mayor is there, and is the police chief at the hospital as well?
He's on his way.
Okay,
yes.
And so the chief is on his way to the hospital. They'll be giving us an update on the condition of the officers, but for now, we're going to leave it in this middle column. One other thing we want to leave in this middle column are the details of the warrant. So we know that a warrant was being served. What it was being served for, who it was being served to, we don't know. So at this point, we know it was a warrant, but we don't know the details. And that's going to help provide a lot of insight as to what happened out there today. So for now, we're going to leave it in this middle column. We also have this column over here. It's our false column. We put that there because whenever there's a big event like this, there's a lot of information, even a lot of false information that's either passed around on Facebook, on Twitter, Instagram, you name it. And once it's a big piece of information that people start to believe and they pass it around, people don't know what to believe anymore. So what we're asking you to do is, if you see something like that, you can either hashtag KHOU Verify, either on Facebook or on Twitter, or you can email us. The address is verify@khou.com. We will tell you if it goes in this column. We'll tell you if it goes here, and we'll tell you if we have the information to be able to put it in this verified column. But guys, you know, this is kind of minute by minute updating. And as of right now, this is what we know, and this is what we're able to verify and pass along to our viewers.
Tiffany, thank you so much. And you made a really good point. In these breaking news situations, so much of our information comes from social media, from updates on Twitter and Facebook. And so we want to make sure that the updates that we are bringing to you are from officials and they are accurate. And so that is why we verify this information for you. Thank you so much, Tiffany.
Let's turn to Lauren Tallarico, who talked to neighbors.
Lauren, this was an afternoon of sheer terror for some of these folks, wasn't it?
You can say that again. Residents who live on this block of Harding Street were escorted back into their homes a couple hours ago. They were evacuated for their safety as this whole thing unfolded. Needless to say, it was quite the evening for these residents of this neighborhood.
Just before 5 p.m.
And then it stopped, and then again.
Shot after shot fired in southeast Houston.
There was a total about maybe about 15 shots, I believe.
Stopping Gloverdale residents in their tracks, including Rosie Tellez.
There's gunshots, so I pulled over.
Right now, you're watching what she saw next.
Officer down! Officer down! There goes one SWAT. He shot in the arm.
She saw 2 of the 4 officers shot, one in the arm, the other the leg. She says at least one even rested on her car, waiting for an ambulance.
They're just standing there trying to catch their breath.
Moments later, streets were blocked off as neighbors watched and worried.
We never had a problem like this. This is just horrendous.
Now, hoping their prayers are answered tonight.
I have a nephew that's an officer, so, you know, I pray deeply. I hope they're okay and, you know, full recovery.
I'm hoping that any policemen that got injured, that they're okay, because, you know, there are heroes here. So I'm just praying that they'll all be safe.
As are we. Residents were allowed back into their homes, but everybody else is being asked to stay away because this investigation is still very much an active one. Len, back to you.
All right, Lauren, earlier. So we don't know the officers' names, but what about their conditions?
Larry Seward is at Memorial Hermann Hospital tonight where they were all taken. Larry, what's the latest?
The update, Mia, you guys mentioned it off the top. 1 officer shot in the shoulder is at home tonight. 4 others are still here in the hospital, conditions ranging from good to critical. They work undercover, so you will not hear names in this story, just descriptions of 5 men that Police Chief Art Acevedo calls courageous. The 2 most seriously hurt landed at Memorial Hermann stable but critically hurt, both shot in the neck. One is 50 years old on the force more than half his life. The other, a senior police officer with more experience who chose to be with his team in the line of fire despite being shot on duty several times before.
Most people would call it a day after being shot and surviving. This man is 54 years old. He's the case agent on this case, and he was there in the front lines. If that doesn't tell you about the heart of the men and women we have the privilege to lead, I don't know what will.
2 others hurt, 40 and 33-year-olds. One shot in the shoulder, another in the leg, will go home tomorrow. A 5th officer hurt his knee dodging gunfire. All are part of HPD's Narcotics Team 15. Busting drug dealers is their only job, and HPD's union rep is fed up seeing their bravest attacked.
We are sick and tired of having targets on our back. We are sick and tired of having dirtbags trying to take our lives when all we're trying to do is protect this community and protect our families. Enough is enough. And if you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, well, just know we've all got your number now. We're going to be keeping track of all of y'all, and we're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. We've had enough, folks.
Most of Narcotics Team 15 made it here to the hospital to visit with their partners and their partners' family. Those shot are getting support from every type of law enforcement that you can imagine within the state of Texas. Lynn, Mia.
All right, standing with our sisters and brothers in blue, Larry Seward reporting. Thank you so much. Governor Greg Abbott is offering whatever help he can. He released this statement tonight that reads, quote, "This evening's horrific attack on police officers is a solemn reminder of the service and sacrifice our brave men and women in law enforcement make every day to keep us safe. The city of Houston and the Houston Police Department will have whatever state resources they need to bring swift justice to those involved." The governor is just one of so many people reaching out to lift up those those injured officers. The hashtag Pray for HPD is trending nationwide tonight, and some of Houston's biggest names are lending their support. Houston Texan star J.J. Watt retweeted HPD saying, thinking about the officers involved and hoping everyone is going to be all right. And Astros player Alex Bregman says, heartbroken. My thoughts and prayers are with our police officers and their families. We also saw messages of support from other police departments from around the country. Fort Bend County Sheriff Troy Nail says, sending our prayers from Fort Bend County Chief. And then there's this from New York City's police chief, Terrence Monahan. He tweeted, Houston police need the prayers and support of their brothers and sisters in blue and all Americans during this terrible attack. New York police stand with you, Houston.
And our thoughts here at KHOU 11 News are with the officers and their families tonight. It has been quite an ordeal and quite a day. We'll be right back.
Mayor Turner and the council members here, Mayor Turner will open up the briefing. Mayor?
Let me just start off by saying that this has been a tough day for our city, but I certainly want to encourage all Houstonians to pray for all of our police officers who are at Memorial Hermann. This is one of the finest hospitals you will find anywhere in the country, and they are being attended to with the best medical care. So pray for all of our police officers. I will tell you, one of them is either will be discharged if it has not already been. That's good news. And for the others who will be remaining here at the hospital, pray for them, and pray for their families. Pray for their spouses, their children, their parents. All of their loved ones, and there are many loved ones that are on the road, en route here. So pray for those who will be flying from outside of the state, and pray for those who are on the road driving in. That's important. Let me also thank EMS and the fire department for the work that they did in getting all of them here to this hospital in very quick time. Let me tell you, let me commend EMS, Chief Pena, the fire department, all of them who responded to our police officers in their moment of need and got them here in very fast time so that they could be attended to. I want to thank the Houston Police Department and others for clearing the roadway, for clearing the freeway, so that they could bring them, get them here so they could get the care that they desperately needed in a very quick fashion. And then I just want to thank all of Houston for just offering their prayers. Let me just say this. Our job is to keep people safe in our city. And I want to be very clear is that, we do not tolerate any sort of activity, whether it's drug activity, drug trafficking, whatever it may be. We don't tolerate it in our city. That we want to work night and day to make sure that our city remains safe. We don't want anyone injured in any manner, whether it's a person that's on the street or whether it's a police officer, whether it's a firefighter, or first responder, whoever it might be. And so I'm just very grateful and thankful for everyone who's come together in this moment. I want to thank the members of City Council who are here standing as well tonight, who have left their offices or their homes to be here. I want to say a special thanks to each one of the City Council members. I want to say a special thanks for Tim and Fatita, who is here to stand and to be at this hospital, continuing to pray for all the police officers. And I want to thank all of you for the coverage that you have provided. But and the medical staff. I really want to thank the medical staff here at Hermann Memorial. They are just incredible, and they are giving some fantastic care to these police officers. So, Chief, let me turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for always, one of the calls you never want to get as a chief is you've had officers shot, and one of the calls you never want to make to a mayor, to a family member, is that officers have been hurt. So I'm going to go over the incident real quick, and we've had a second officer involved shooting in Northside, and I don't know if you guys want to hear about that or not, but I want to focus initially on this first shooting. So at about 4:15 p.m., a narcotics group 15 from the Houston Police Department, who was working an investigation involving the sales of narcotics out of a residence in the 7800 block of Hardy Street, responded to Hardy Street as a team of about a dozen narcotics officers and about a half a dozen patrol officers from the East Side Division. The patrol officers were there to provide support and obviously to provide the uniformed presence for this operation. Shortly before 5 o'clock, the officers, the narcotics officers, attempted to serve a search warrant on the location at 7800 Hardy Street. They announced themselves as Houston police officers while simultaneously breaching the front door of the residence. And while the police car, the marked police unit with uniformed members as well as the police officers or the police garb also hit the siren to make sure everybody can and hit the lights so they knew that police officers were there. Immediately upon breaching the door, the officers came under fire from 1 or 2 suspects inside the house. We're not sure how many of the suspects fired at this time. As you can imagine, it was a pretty chaotic scene over there, and the investigation's unfolding. As a result of the exchange of gunfire between our officers and 1 or 2 suspects, we have 5 officers injured. 4 were struck by gunfire. 2 officers are currently in surgery. They're in surgery for gunfire sustained, and they are in critical but stable condition. And we're hopeful that with the prayers of this community that they will recover. But again, they are in critical condition but stable. Their families are here. Some of the families are in transit, but 2 officers are currently in surgery. 2 other officers were shot, and they will remain hospitalized for observation for at least a 24-hour period. They were struck by gunfire, but they are basically ambulatory, and they're expected to make a full recovery. 1 officer sustained an injury during the gun battle. It's important to note that once the initial indications are once the officers breached the door and the gunfire began from the suspects. One of the suspects actually retreated momentarily to the back of the room, and then that suspect came back and again engaged the officers in gunfire. I have not been able to determine how many officers are shot, have returned fire. That's part of the ongoing investigation. As you can imagine, we needed to work the scene from a tactical perspective. SWAT responded along with other allied agencies. We established a pretty hard perimeter, and once you had 5 officers injured, 4 shot, and 5 believed to be shot at the time, we had to slow down and actually turn it into a very methodical, tactical operation. The SWAT operators, upon taking control of the scene, utilized 2 different robots to go into the residence and to actually help search the residence. 2 suspects were struck by return gunfire by members of the Houston Police Department. Those suspects, once we were able to render the scene safe by SWAT, were pronounced deceased at the scene from the return gunfire from the officers. I want to personally thank the Houston Fire Department. They're phenomenal partners. The care and the concern and the love that they showed and displayed for our officers and their families was second to none. Steve Pena runs a world-class organization, and I also personally want to thank, on behalf of all the men and women of the Houston Police Department, the staff that you see behind it. We are so blessed to live in a city with medical facilities that people from around the world that of well means come here because they know that these hospitals, this institution of hospitals, are really second to none. I really believe as a result of their excellence, our officers couldn't be in better hands. I also want to thank LifeFlight, and I'll call Chief Pena here in a minute to update you on who was how many were transported by LifeFlight and by ground. And I also want to thank our members of the Houston Police Department. It's important to note that this investigation began, and I was talking to the council members and Stardig and Gallegos and Dwight Boykins and the mayor, that they received emails, we receive emails, we receive complaints. Our eyes and ears are truly the community that we serve. We could not do what we do without the community we serve. This all began because a neighbor had the courage to say, we're not going to put up. We think that they're dealing dope out of this house. And we don't just ignore that. We immediately passed that on to our narcotics division that began this investigation, was able to actually determine that narcotics dealing, street-level narcotics dealing, black tar heroin was being dealt out of this, and we know the poison that's killing so many kids, not only here in Houston, but around the country. They immediately started an investigation, and that's what they were there tonight. They were there to execute a search warrant, and unfortunately, as we know, Ironically, the mayor and I had our press conference today, and Tillman Fertitta, the chairman of the Police Foundation, Houston Police Foundation, we were celebrating two things today. One, at the Houston Police Academy, we're celebrating the groundbreakings right behind me there. He's being shy. The groundbreaking of a tactical village that, again, is the result of a $10 million investment by the people of this community in their police department that tells you the kind of support we have. And two, we were there to celebrate the fact that despite the fact that this police department in 2019 has 300 fewer officers than we had 20 years ago, about 500,000 more people, our men and women, we said it then and we'll say it again, they don't make excuses, they make a difference. And what you saw today with these officers showing that they have the courage, the guts, and the perseverance to do what they need to do to keep this community safe. And so with that, I'll come back and answer questions of the mayor, more questions on the actual incident, and do some Spanish. But I'd like Chief Pena, who's not only a colleague, he's a dear friend, to come up and talk a little bit about the outstanding work of his men and women.
Good evening. This is a tough day for the Houston Fire Department and the city of Houston. I think we need to ensure that we keep these officers that were injured here tonight in our prayers and their families. There's some real evil in this world, and I think today was evident, this incident was evident as far as the dangers that our first responders face each and every day out here in the streets. Couldn't be prouder of the work that the Houston Fire Department did. We were on scene in support of the Houston police officers' operation. It was the incredible work and quick work of our medic units that gave these officers, these injured officers, the best chance of survival in bringing them here to this world-class facility. I do want to make special mention Medic 18, Medic 19, and Ambulance 19 and their crews here tonight on C shift, who did an outstanding job of ensuring that the injured officers were provided with the critical care that they needed, as well as the other units on scene that were there to evacuate the patients onto life flight. So we had 3 injured officers that were transported by ambulance here to Herman Memorial, and 2 that were life flighted from the scene. All of them receiving advanced life support and advanced life care throughout transport. We got them to the hospital in critical but stable condition. And again, we're praying for these officers to pull through. And can't say enough about the work that the Houston police officers and the Houston Police Department do each and every day, as well as the Houston Fire Department and the incredible support that we provide for each other. So with that, we'll be available for any questions.
Chief, before you go on, well, hold on. Let me just acknowledge the fact that Governor Abbott did call, had a chance to talk to him, and expressed his concern for all of these officers and their families, and wanted me to let you know that he's certainly sending forth his prayers on behalf of these officers as well as their families. So I did want to make that note.
Chief, the 2 officers in critical, where are they wounded?
Say again?
The 2 officers.
They both were struck in the neck area by gunfire.
Did they make it inside the house? Or
You know what? That's part of the investigation. We know that that they breached and they came under fire right away. Let me just say that to the media real quick. I just got reports a minute ago that somebody's already found the house of one of these officers and showed up. That is irresponsible. These are narcotics officers that work undercover. They do not need the media out in front of their house. So it's not helpful, and I don't think it's appropriate. So if you're that station, whoever you were, please don't just get out of that area. These guys all work undercover. Let me just give you a quick overview of who got shot in terms of ages. And one of the individuals struck was age 50. He's a sergeant. He was transported by ambulance. Another one of our male sergeants by the name of, I'm not going to give it up because I don't think we've made all the notifications. Age 50. Was life flighted. Another senior police officer, age 54, and I can tell you this is the case agent. And let me tell you why I think these cops are heroes. This officer's been shot several times in line of duty. And while most people would call it a day after being shot and surviving, this man is 54 years old. He's the case agent on this case, and he was there in the front lines. If that doesn't tell you about the heart of the men and women we have the privilege to lead, I don't know what will. He's He's 54, and he's been on since 1984. The first one since 1993, the second one since 1991. The other officer that was life-flighted, the 54-year-old and the 40-year-old, those two are in surgery. He was actually life-flighted as well. And the last one is 33, and he's transported by ambulance. The officers that returned fire at the scene are being debriefed by the Special Investigations Unit, by Internal Affairs. The Harris County District Attorney's Office is on scene at the officer-involved shooting, and they will be working with us, the Civil Rights Division, to ensure that all policies, procedures, and law were followed. With that, I'm going to let Joe Gamaldi, who's in times like this, sometimes what we can't do, the Houston Police Officers Union do a phenomenal job of being partners with us, and I'd like to have him say a couple of comments on behalf of the Police Officers Union.
Yeah, first of all, let me just thank the community. The outpouring of support has once been amazing, and it shows why Houston's the greatest city in the world. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who already contacted us to make sure these officers are doing all right. And I want to thank all of our partners at HFD, all the officers out on that scene, who all played a crucial role in getting them down here. And certainly thank you to the medical staff, the world-class medical staff here that are taking care of our officers. But now I want to speak on behalf of the 5,200 brave men and women of the Houston Police Department and the other 800,000 police officers that are working these streets every single day, putting their lives on the line. We are sick and tired of having targets on our back. We are sick and tired of having dirtbags trying to take our lives when all we're trying to do is protect this community and protect our families. Enough is enough. And if you're the ones that are out there spreading the rhetoric that police officers are the enemy, well, just know we've all got your number now. We're going to be keeping track of all of y'all, and we're going to make sure that we hold you accountable every time you stir the pot on our police officers. We've had enough, folks. We're out there doing our jobs every day, putting our lives on the line for our families. Enough is enough. Now, please, keep these officers in your prayers.
Thanks, Joe. Mayor, you have anything? We'll open it up to questions, or I can do Spanish real quick.
2 suspects
Questions.
total, or 3 suspects?
There are 2 suspects that were shot and returned gunfire, and were they pronounced at the scene. 2 suspects. Semi-automatic is all I have. I don't have anything other than semi-automatic.
Tell us about those suspects. Their background,
I can't tell you anything other than I know that because we had a search warrant that narcotics activity was going on in that residence, specifically the sale of black tar heroin.
Is there gang activity related as well?
We don't. That's part of the investigation. Semi-automatic pistols. 1 officer, out of the 5 officers, 4 were shot, 2 critically that are in surgery, both shot in the neck. But they're stable, thank God. The mayor and I talked to the surgeon on the way out, and 1 was an injury that's not from gunfire.
What kind of injury?
It's a knee injury. When you're getting shot, people are moving in all kinds of directions, and when there's a lot of shots being fired at you, and you get 4 officers shot, 5 officers shot. That's a lot of gunfire that came our way.
Do you know if any of the officers were injured by friendly fire?
No, I mean, let me just say this right off the bat. We don't suspect anybody being struck by friendly fire. I don't expect, because our people are really well trained, even though in these very dynamic situations that certainly can happen. But if an officer was shot by friendly fire, the only people responsible under the law and morally are the people inside that residence that decided to take shots at police officers executing a lawful search warrant. What else?
¿Cuál es la situación en ese momento en esa comunidad que es altamente hispana? ¿Qué mensaje tienen para la gente ahí y sobre el estado de salud de los?
Bueno, la comunidad hispana, queremos que sepan que tenemos un gran orgullo que la comunidad vio que había, pensaban que estaban vendiendo drogas en esta casa en la calle que le dije hace un ratico. La comunidad tuvo el coraje para decirnos, por favor, no queremos esta actividad en nuestra comunidad. Nuestros oficiales, que son héroes, inmediatamente la división de narcotraficante de narcotics empezaron una investigación, determinaron que estaban vendiendo heroína, lo dije bien, en esa locación. Tenían orden de la corte para entrar y buscar las drogas, y casi a las 5 de la tarde de esta tarde, como una docena de oficiales de investigaciones narcotraficantes de narcóticos fueron a entrar a la casa. Cuando abrieron la puerta, inmediatamente 1 o 2 sospechosos comenzaron a disparar a los oficiales. Los oficiales también dispararon para atrás. Uno de los sospechosos se huyó para atrás a otra habitación, después salió de nuevo disparando más a los oficiales. Tenemos 5 oficiales que fueron desgraciadamente heridos por las armas de fuego de los sospechosos. Dos de los oficiales fueron heridos en el cuello y están en la seguridad ahora mismo que estoy hablando. Gracias a Dios, aunque están en condiciones críticas, pero también no pensamos que van a morir. Les suplicamos a la comunidad, le damos las gracias por sus oraciones. Por favor, sigan orando por nuestros oficiales, y quiero darle las gracias al alcalde, a sus colegas, a todos mis colegas, especialmente al jefe Sam Peña, los bomberos, también el Life Flight que llegaron. 3 de los oficiales fueron traídos al hospital por helicóptero del Life Flight, aquí del Herman Memorial. Y gracias a Dios vivimos en una ciudad que tenemos un departamento policial, que no tenemos muchos policías, somos pocos, pero tenemos gran corazón y no tenemos miedo a combatir el crimen. Y quiero que sepa que uno de los oficiales que está en la seguridad ahora, esta es la 4ª vez que ha estado herido por armas de fuego en su carrera. Es un hombre de 54 años y muchos después de una vez no quieren trabajar, pues él sigue viniendo al trabajo y haciendo el esfuerzo. Los oficiales que fueron heridos, uno es de 54 años, como le dije, que era el agente. Otro fue de 50 años, otro de 50 años, uno de 40 años y uno de 33 años. Los sospechosos pienso que son hispanos. No tengo su identificación por ahora, pero hay 2 sospechosos que fallecieron en la escena.
La situación, ¿cuál es la situación en el 7800 de Harding? ¿Está
No, ¿7,000 qué?
7800 de Harding, ¿está controlado?
No, es en la 7800, sí. Está todo controlado. The scene at 7800 Harding is stable, it's under control. All we have now is an investigation going with our partners. Okay? I don't have anything on the suspects. No, I don't have anything. It's part of the investigation.
Sí, de los oficiales que usted dijo que de los 4, usted dijo que uno estaba en cirugía, que tenía 40 años.
Hay 2 que están en seguridad. Hay 2 que están en seguridad que fueron heridos en el cuello. Uno de 54 años, que le dije que esa es la 4ª vez que ha tenido heridas de armas de fuego. Otro de 40 años que está en la seguridad. Y después hay 4 que fueron heridos por armas.
All right, there we have the police chief, Art Acevedo, giving us in Spanish now what he told us already in English. In case you missed it, we had 5 officers injured, 4 by gunfire, 1 injured their knee, but 2 are in critical but stable condition. They're in surgery right now. They have injuries to their neck area. This all started on Harding Street in Southeast Houston this afternoon because a neighbor complained that there was drug activity in that house. So these officers came to search a warrant, and then gunfire erupted. 2 suspects are dead. Good news is one of those officers will probably get to go home tonight. 2 others are in the hospital for observation.
And as you said, 4 of them were shot, 2 of them in surgery in critical but stable condition. The other 2 are stable, and then 1 officer suffered a knee injury trying to get away. But they were serving a warrant, we now know, for black tar heroin. The chief commending those neighbors for speaking up about possible criminal activity in their neighborhood.
KHOU here with investigative reporter Jeremy Rogowski, breaking new information on that deadly drug raid and shootout in Southeast Houston, and the stories from Houston police narcotics investigators not adding up.
They're not. This is major news, Sherman. You'll recall police originally said an informant had bought heroin the day before the raid went down at that Southeast Houston home, but new court documents we obtained show otherwise. Investigators with HPD's Special Investigations Unit say they interviewed 2 informants that were supposedly connected to the case, but both of them said they never had been to the Harding Street home and never did any controlled drug buys. What's more, those informants said they never recognized these people, the homeowners who died in a gun battle with police. This is indeed a major development in this case. As we reported last week, 1 officer listed on the original search warrant was relieved of duty by HPD. Last word is no action has been taken against the 2nd officer. We're still also waiting to hear from Chief Art Acevedo's reaction to this. More updates online and later on KHOU. Sherman?
You know what? You'd never know about that family's lawsuit by looking at the case officer who was involved in the case, his personnel file.
In fact, it contains a career full of stellar job reviews, but investigative reporter Jeremy Rogowski found that repeated praise comes with questions too. Jeremy?
Well, Mia and Len, the big question when you examine that officer's file is just how closely were police supervisors keeping an eye on him, when time and time again we found those supervisors simply copied and pasted parts of his performance reviews. Outstanding, outstanding, outstanding. Twice a year for more than a dozen years, that's the grade Houston police supervisors gave the narcotics officer who's now at the center of a criminal investigation for allegedly lying about a confidential informant drug buy that led to a deadly raid at the Southeast Houston home. Ironically, police supervisors had often praised that officer for utilizing CIs to positive ends and for his highest level of safety awareness. But that wording is identical, copy and pasted in every employee review over the course of 4 years. Despite describing the officer's work product as excellent, supervisors repeatedly said he needed to work on turning in paperwork in a timely manner. In his last review, again with mostly outstanding grades, supervisors wrote the officer needs to refocus on narcotics case management and increase his productivity levels. 5 months later, the officer allegedly used a falsified warrant to lead the raid that left him and 3 other officers shot and 2 homeowners dead. Now, Houston police disciplined this officer a half dozen times during his career, including a reprimand for failing to submit crack cocaine evidence to the crime lab. But that never shows up in his performance review. He also received more than 30 letters of commendation during his 34 years on the force.
Another drug case that was handled by a Houston police officer who was under criminal investigation has been tossed out. Investigators call it in the interest of justice. It is one of hundreds of cases involving veteran officer Gerald Goines getting a second look by the DA's office. Goines is accused of lying on a warrant that was used in a botched raid. A couple in the home was killed in a shootout with police. And KHOU 11 investigates found other cases tossed out because of a lack of evidence or sloppy police work by Goines. Investigative reporter Jeremy Rogowski here with the exclusive details. Jeremy?
Well, then, we reviewed more than 100 search warrant cases filed by Goines over the past 7 years, and a couple things stood out to us. The number of times he did not find the type of drug he was looking for, and the number of his cases that ended up going nowhere. These 2 career criminals caught a big break after HPD officer Gerald Goines arrested them. Their cases thrown out because of sloppy police work. One prosecutor wrote Officer Gerald Goines never showed with search warrant after requesting for months. Another complained been waiting for months for officers to update the offense report. Still has not been done. Is that acceptable?
Obviously not.
Dr. Jim Dozier is a former Houston police officer, DEA agent, and county prosecutor.
There needs to be better oversight of what that officer was doing.
Of 109 search warrant cases filed by Officer Goines, 20% were dismissed for evidence issues or no probable cause. In 12% of those warrant cases, police did not find the drugs they were looking for.
That's quite a high percentage of searching for one drug and coming out with another.
For instance, in one case, the search warrant stated an informant bought crack cocaine from a home, but later police only recovered marijuana. Another supposed crack buy only netted a few ounces of marijuana, some Xanax pills, and a bottle of codeine cough syrup.
That would be a red flag to me.
That coming from a former federal agent who's worked on hundreds of search warrants for drugs.
Most of the times we walked out with the narcotics that were described in the search warrant.
Now, we also found issues with weapons. In more than 50 of his search warrants, Gerald Goines never listed any guns seized, even though he claimed informants saw guns during earlier drug buys. Meantime, the attorney for the officer told us she does not find any of this unusual or concerning.
So we want to make sure that we're hiring the right people to do the right thing for the right reasons, and we need to make sure that we're moving forward. Our city, we have the best city in the whole world, and we haven't had the issues that other cities have had. So this one incident, I hope, will not set us back. I hope that people understand that they can call and ask for help. And if they're concerned about this type of services or that they're in fear, they need to contact their electeds. You want to make sure that people are trusting our police officers and our firefighters.
More fallout now from the botched drug raid and shootout on Harding Street.
That raid ended with 4 officers shot and a husband and wife inside that home dead.
Investigative reporter Jeremy Rogowski learned the Harris County District Attorney's Office is now expanding its probe into the officers connected to that raid.
The DA's office is now launching a review of 800 additional criminal cases linked to a second narcotics officer connected to the Harding Street raid. His name is Stephen Bryant, a 22-year veteran of the force who was relieved of duty last month after his name appeared on the original Harding Street search warrant. The lead investigator who wrote up that warrant, Gerald Goines, is accused of lying on it by fabricating a confidential informant drug buy. The DA's office is already reviewing 1,400 past cases of Gerald Goines to ensure that arrests and convictions were proper. It's notifying defense attorneys of both reviews and has already dismissed 2 of Stephen Bryant's cases in the interest of justice. Jeremy Rogowski, KHOU 11 Investigates.
And we have been researching and digging into this story from the very beginning. Go to KHOU.com/investigations to see other stories we have done on other officers involved, the controversial no-knock warrants, and more.
Covering new information about the Houston police officer at the center of a criminal investigation. It stems from this botched drug raid that left a couple dead. Now the Harris County District Attorney is reviewing all the past cases of Officer Gerald Goines.
Yeah, we're talking about more than 1,000 cases going back decades, and we're digging deeper as well. KHOU 11 Investigates reporter Jeremy Rogowski found some things that just don't add up. What do you see, Jeremy?
Well, then, to justify his no-knock warrant at the Harding Street home, Gerald Goines claimed that a confidential informant saw a handgun inside, but as we now know, police never recovered that type of weapon. We found similar discrepancies with scores of other drug cases that Officer Goines has filed. We examined drug cases filed by Gerald Goines all the way back to 2012. Records show 109 of them were based on search warrants. Nearly all of those no-knock warrants, authorizing police to barge in by surprise, just like how the Harding Street raid went down. And just like with Harding Street, Officer Goines almost always claimed in his other cases that it was too dangerous to knock because a confidential informant saw a gun inside. But records show in every single one of those cases we examined, police never recovered a gun.
If an informant said there's a weapon, why isn't there a weapon at the crime scene?
In other drug search warrants we examined, different HPD officers did list the guns they seized. If they don't, former federal agent Larry Carson says that's cause for concern.
There's a couple of questions that come up. One, of course, is the reliability and credibility of the actual informant. The second issue, though, is it raises the issue of, is there an informant?
In the Harding Street raid, Officer Goines is accused of lying about a confidential informant drug buy the very day before police stormed in.
We'll give each case a fair review.
It prompted Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg to review 1,400 past cases filed by Officer Gerald Goines.
We need to look at the track record and see if possibly we've arrested innocent people or people who aren't guilty of the crimes they're charged with, which is what the District Attorney is looking at.
Now, we reached out to the criminal defense attorney for Officer Gerald Goines. Nicole Nabord told me, quote, none of this appears unusual, concerning, or out of the ordinary. Len?
All right, thank you, Jeremy. The KHOU 11 investigative team looks into Goines' personnel file as well. You can take a look at what we found. Just go to KHOU.com/investigation. Starting with breaking news, Harris County prosecutors have dropped more cases linked to embattled Houston police officer Gerald Goines. The veteran narcotics officer is accused of lying about a no-knock search warrant that led to a deadly Harding Street raid back in January.
Prosecutors have been reviewing his other drug cases today. They dropped 2 cocaine charges against Roy Willis. A district attorney spokesman said the ongoing investigation of Goines prevents them from moving forward to trial. The charges may be refiled at a later time.
Tonight, both autopsies from the botched Harding Street drug raid back in January have been made public. It says Dennis Tuttle, one of the homeowners, was shot 9 times, including in the head, neck, and chest. Yesterday, we told you police shot his wife, Regina Nicholas, 5 times. No hard drugs were found during the raid, which led to a sweeping investigation of the officers involved and changes in policy within the department.
New at 4:30, another search warrant in the deadly Harding Street raid. The new warrant allowing investigators to seize electronic data of now retired Houston officer Gerald Goines. He's accused of lying to obtain the no-knock warrant in the raid. As for that electronic data, it includes GPS info inside his car, as well as contacts, text messages, and call logs. 2 people died in that raid, which opened an FBI investigation.
Stories, and we're starting with the investigation into that deadly Harding Street raid. Houston police have turned over thousands of files to the Harris County District Attorney's Office. 2 people died in that raid back in January when prosecutors say that an officer lied about an informant buying drugs at the house. The DA's office recently demanded information on all of HPD's informants dating back 5 years. DA Kim Ogg threatened legal action if HPD failed to turn over those files by today, but again, the department did. Now, the DA's office issued this statement. In part, it says the Harding Street case is huge and more complex than most other cases. From possible misconduct to the use of confidential informants, we must review everything and get it right. The public demands and deserves nothing less.
The Harris County DA is asking for more help to investigate the botched Harding Street raid. The office wants 10 new staff members to investigate.
Those positions, which include senior prosecutors, though, would cost about $2 million a year.
Adam Bennett is live downtown where they're debating this now. And Adam, what are they saying?
Well, Ron and Sherman, they just started about an hour ago, and it's gotten pretty heated at certain moments. One of the prosecutors told commissioners that they only have 4 people that investigate these kind of cases, and they are already slammed. And this comes after yesterday, where they got thousands of files from HPD's narcotics division, with even more expected next week, the remainder of those files. Now, if county commissioners sign off on this, the DA's office would get more than $1.7 million to look into possible police misconduct. The DA's office says it will review more than 2,000 cases linked to Officer Gerald Goines. He led January's no-knock warrant raid at that home on Harding Street in southeast Houston. You may remember 2 homeowners died and 5 Houston police officers were hurt. The court documents say Goines is under investigation for lying about a drug buy and confidential informants on a search warrant. The informants reportedly later told investigators that they never bought drugs from that Harding Street home.
Instead, the totality of these officers' work must be reviewed. That is 14,000 cases, and we're asking 4 people to review that. If we ever want to regain the public's trust in our law enforcement officers and in our community and in our government, we need to put the resources behind this activity.
Yeah, things have gotten pretty heated at some moments during this hour-long discussion so far. At one point, Commissioner Rodney Ellis was pushing for an outside group to come in and help the DA's office. And even at another point, Commissioner Steve Raddick told County Judge Alina Hidalgo that she was, quote, weak on crime. Now, if commissioners approve these new hires, prosecutors say it will take between 2 to 3 years to go through all of these cases. Now, right now, a number of members of the public are speaking to commissioners. Many of them are against this measure, one of them telling commissioners that she believes that they need to focus on reforming the flaws in the criminal justice system instead. Ron and Sherman?
All right, that Harding Street raid, very emotional for people. Thank you, Adam.
Today we heard explosive claims in that botched Harding Street drug raid. The brother of the woman killed says a private investigation found a number of inconsistencies with what Houston police say happened back in January.
Matt Doherty has their side of the story.
The first inconsistency they point out is how the woman was shot.
Attorneys say their private investigator has evidence Regina Nicholas was shot from outside of her home. Houston police originally said she was shot inside of the home while wrestling a weapon with a narcotics officer. Attorneys say black tar heroin was never sold at the home. They say Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle were not drug dealers. Police claimed they raided the home after a confidential informant bought drugs there, but nothing was ever found to prove that.
The city and its command staff were very emphatic that this was the right house, that there had been an actual purchase of heroin in this heroin drug house that was feared by the neighbors.
We actually bought black tar heroin at that location.
Attorneys claim their private forensic investigator found 10 more bullets inside of the home 1 month after police finished their investigation. They say bullets were fired almost directly into walls at one point. Then they showed this cell phone video allegedly filmed by a neighbor 30 minutes after the shootout ended.
Right there on the floor,
In the video, you can hear 2 loud gunshots. The brother of Regina Nicholas says he just wants answers.
From the beginning, all I want is the truth, some kind of closure. Hope this don't happen again.
Those attorneys filed a petition in probate court today requesting the depositions of those officers involved. Of course, we're going to stay on top of this case and bring you the latest as it becomes available. But for now, we're in the Museum District. Standing for Houston, I'm Matt Doherty, KHOU 11 News.
Explosive new allegations this afternoon coming from the family of the woman killed in January's botched Harding Street drug raid.
Yeah, the family's attorneys claim that a private forensic investigator has found Regina Nicholas was shot from outside of her home. Matt Doherty, that definitely contradicts what police say happened that day.
Yeah, that's just one of the shocking allegations we heard here less than an hour ago. The attorneys have filed a petition with the probate courts requesting the depositions of some of those officers involved so that they might be able to address some of these findings. They say their private investigator showed Regina Nicholas was shot from outside of her home. Attorneys also showed where several other rounds were fired into the home as well. Attorneys say black tar heroin was never sold there, something they say police lied about. They also say 30 minutes after the alleged shootout supposedly ended in the home, a neighbor took cell phone video where 2 gunshots are fired inside of the home.
Somebody took a gun at some point, likely long after Dennis Tuttle was dead, at least based on the physical evidence, and went into an inside wall and fired 2 shots into a wall. That's also been documented by gunpowder residue physical chemical tests.
What you just heard there, that private investigator also contending that bullets were fired into a wall. Now, I asked the officers who were if the officers who were shot during the raid may have been wounded by each other. The attorneys told me they are still looking into that, but have limited information from the investigation from police. Now, Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg released a statement earlier today pledging that she will find out the truth behind all of this, asking people to withhold any judgment for now. Back to you, Russ.
All right, Matt, thank you.
A small group gathered in Southeast Houston this evening to protest police brutality and call for justice for the couple shot and killed during a botched raid on Harding Street back in January. Regina Nicholas and her husband, Dennis Tuttle, were shot and killed during that raid. 5 officers were injured. This group is calling for justice for the family and for all evidence held by Houston police to be released. They say this is the beginning of several rallies they have planned.
This takes a long time, you know. So we're going to be here, and our team is going to be here. You know, we will do our best to support.
On Thursday, we learned contradicting information about what happened from a private investigator hired by the Nicholas family. That investigator said Nicholas was shot from outside her home and also showed where several other rounds were fired into walls of the home there on Harding Street, calling the police story a contradiction to the evidence. That's, of course, one we'll continue to keep an eye on.
The district attorney says Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nichols were innocent when they were shot dead by Houston police officers. Nicholas's family always said she was innocent and started their own investigation. And today, her family's attorney says, in part, our independent investigation is focused not only on HPD Narcotics Squad 15, but also about the conduct pattern and practices of HPD before, during, and after the out-of-control, unjustified execution of Regina in her own home.
KHOU 11 Investigates dug up some serious questions about the police work of Gerald Goines throughout his entire career.
But Jeremy Rogalski says Houston police didn't catch the warning signs. Jeremy.
Well, Reka, records show a pattern of red flags in some of the cases filed by Gerald Goines, but despite those, HPD's higher up routinely said he was doing an outstanding job. Long before the deadly Harding Street drug raid, we found a paper trail of sloppy police work by Gerald Goines. In one drug case, a prosecutor wrote Officer Goines never showed with search warrant after requesting for months. Another complained been waiting for months for officers to update the offense report. Still has not been done. KHOU 11 Investigates reviewed more than 100 search warrant cases filed by former Officer Goines. 20% of those were dismissed for evidence issues or no probable cause. In 12% of the warrant cases, records show police did not find the drugs they were looking for. Just like what happened with the botched Harding Street raid. Yet despite the red flags in the career of Gerald Goines, Houston police regularly praise the veteran cop, writing outstanding twice a year for more than a dozen years on his job performance reviews. Now, since Harding Street, HPD has overhauled its narcotics policy regarding no-knock drug warrants. All of those must now be approved by executive assistant chiefs or Chief Art Acevedo himself. Len?
Some story, Jeremy. Thank you. Good evening tonight. Shocking charges against two former Houston police officers for their roles in a botched drug raid in January. Those officers are now out on bond. A husband and wife were killed in the raid and 4 officers were wounded. Tonight we're answering your questions about how we got to this point and where the case goes from here. We have team coverage beginning with Larry Siebert in downtown Houston. Larry?
Len, around noon, a judge here signed arrest warrants. Then prosecutors called lawyers for both Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant to hash out their surrender. But what happened next inside this courthouse behind me opened eyes. Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant turned themselves in court with lawyers, a bondsman, and prosecutors in the dark about it until reporters called.
I've not seen a case like this in my 30-plus years of practicing law.
Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg charged Goines with 2 counts of felony murder for his role in the deaths of Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle. In January, both died in a botched Houston police drug raid and shooting that wounded 4 officers, including the now retired Goines. Prosecutors say he lied to get a no-knock warrant for the raid he led. And after it happened, Ogg claims former officer Stephen Bryant lied about a drug buy too.
We recognize that the community has been violated. And I want to assure my fellow Houstonians and other residents of Harris County that we are getting to the truth.
Calling Goines a flight risk, prosecutors asked for $250,000 bonds, a curfew, GPS monitor, and travel restrictions.
I think that it says we want to draw attention to this filing is unfortunately what I think it says. This is not a standard bond. He's been cooperative since the very first day that he learned there was an investigation. He talked with police. He's lived in the same house that he's lived in all along. There's no reason to believe that he would go anywhere.
Bryant's bond was lower but more complicated. His case was supposed to be heard in another court, but that judge was not here. So we watched the judge in Goines' case call his colleague before giving Bryant a $50,000 bond.
I think it's really important for this community to understand our charges that are a result of the Houston Police Department's investigation. So yes, we can investigate ourselves. And yes, we did pursue the good, the bad, and the ugly.
HPD Chief Art Acevedo long expected charges and predicts more will follow. Tomorrow, Gerald Goines will be at a doctor. It's a pre-op visit for surgery he needs to help him get over injuries he suffered in that shooting. He was shot in the face in that raid that caused all of his legal trouble. And Lynn, he is not allowed to leave Harris County.
All right, Larry, thanks for the update. So who are these former officers and what else are Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant accused of doing? Investigative reporter Jeremy Rogalski takes a closer look.
Gerald Goines was a 32-year Houston police veteran, a member of HPD's Narcotics Squad 15, and the case agent who led the raid, ramming the door of the Harding Street home. Here is the original search warrant affidavit Goines wrote that prosecutors now say was full of lies. He claimed a confidential informant had bought heroin from the home the day before the raid, and that fellow Squad 15 officer Stephen Bryant recognized the substance as boy, street slang for heroin. After the raid went south with 4 officers shot and 2 homeowners killed, Chief Art Acevedo stood by the story he knew at the time.
We actually bought black tar heroin at that location.
But no heroin was ever found, court records show, and neither was the supposed informant who bought it.
Goines later admitted, 1, there was no confidential informant who purchased drugs at 7815 Harding Street.
According to District Attorney Kim Ogg, Officer Stephen Bryant also was in on the lies when he wrote this supplemental report 2 days after the raid. In it, Bryant claimed he observed a plastic bag containing 2 small packets of a brown powdery substance, heroin, that was bought from the Harding Street home.
Bryant's claims were false.
District Attorney Ogg called the charges against both officers action number 1 in a sweeping review of thousands of cases worked up by Narcotics Squad 15. Ogg today saying, quote, there may be more to this story.
DA calls this case unprecedented. Now, prosecutors are pouring over 14,000 cases the narcotics unit has worked. Our Grace White is downtown at HPD headquarters tonight with that part of the story. Grace?
Lynn, since this news broke, the entire narcotics division has been under a microscope, and now you heard it. The DA is reviewing their work, trying to see if any other cases have been impacted across Houston.
Dozens of pending cases dismissed, attorneys even notified in cases that have already closed, all fallout from the Harding Street raid. And Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg pledges she's not done.
We recognize that our duty is to the people of this county, and that while today the focus is on Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant, there may be more to the story.
It's a story that continues to unravel. A team of prosecutors are reviewing 14,000 cases filed by HPD's Narcotics Squad 15. That includes 2,200 drug cases linked to the 2 former HPD officers now facing criminal charges. But Houston Police Chief Art Acevedo believes it's not a department-wide problem.
We've been looking at a lot of cases, and we've yet to see, again, any evidence of any systemic issues.
But the chief did say he anticipates more charges will be filed, at least against former HPD officer Gerald Goines. Although charges are up to the DA, Houston police say it's all coming from their own investigation.
The DA just got funding to hire 10 new prosecutors and investigators. They've now got a mountain of work to do. We're live in downtown. Grace White, KHOU 11 News.
We're beginning to understand more about what led prosecutors to file charges against 2 former Houston police officers. They were involved in the deadly Harding Street raid. But there are still a lot of questions about what happened before, during, and after the raid that killed Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas. David Gonzalez turned to experts for answers.
This is not the end of the book. This is the first chapter.
The Harding Street investigation against former HPD officers Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant is far from over. Some people are trying to understand why Goines was charged with felony murder. KHOU legal analyst Gerald Goines says a felony was committed during the raid that led to the shooting that killed Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas.
That is, the tip turned out to be not valid. The no-knock warrant was fraudulent. Therefore, that could be it. Or it could be the tampering with government documents.
Goines says that makes Goines responsible even if he didn't pull the trigger. People are also asking why the DA's office didn't charge the tipster that led police to Harding Street. Goines believes there are still other charges waiting to be filed, but he doesn't think a grand jury will upgrade Goines' charges to capital murder.
Because you got to have a requisite intent to take a life. And here, I think they had the requisite intent to improperly enter a home. Improperly tamper with documents.
Goines says the couple's death is unfortunate, but the review of up to 14,000 cases involving officers is the bigger story.
These officers, same set of officers, could have engaged in the same improper conduct. And that's bad news for the city, bad news for the police department, but it's good news for justice.
He says the Justice Department is now involved, which changes a lot of things. Goines doesn't expect this case to go to trial anytime in the next year. In Houston, I'm David Gonzalez, KHOU 11 News.
It could take several months to get more answers to the questions we all have about this case. We'll keep you updated on the air and online at KHOU.com. You can also watch yesterday's news conferences on our KHOU YouTube page.
I'm Sherman Chow. Today, 2 former HPD officers appearing in court. Gerald Goines and Steve Bryant charged in that botched Harding Street drug raid that left a couple dead. That couple's attorney saying that this is a step in the right direction. Our Michelle Choi also spoke with both of the officers' lawyers.
Surrounded by his attorneys, former Houston police officer Gerald Goines showed up in court Monday morning. His bond conditions read, his case reset for October. Goines is charged with 2 counts of felony murder. Prosecutors say Goines led a deadly no-knock drug raid last January that resulted in the deaths of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas. His attorney says her client's case is unprecedented.
This case was a direct file, which means no grand jury has been able to vet the facts and hear the details of this allegation.
She went on to say they've been at odds with law enforcement when it comes to receiving info on the case, saying her client's first interview with police was while he was heavily medicated and in the hospital suffering from a gunshot wound to the face. She says they've been cooperative from the beginning with law enforcement, but that they haven't been given the same opportunity.
We have not received any information from the government about any of their investigative activities, so it's not been a two-way street.
They're now hoping for their proper day in court.
I absolutely think it was overcharged. We firmly believe that Mr. Goines is innocent of any crime, and we look forward to defending this case vigorously in court.
Meanwhile, Goines' former partner, retired HPD officer Stephen Bryant, was also in court. His case asked to be moved to the 228, the same courtroom and judge as Goines. Bryant is charged with tampering with a government document. His attorney clarifying his client isn't charged with falsifying the warrant used in the botched raid, but what transpired days after it.
He's not charged with anything having to do with the warrant itself. His charge is concerned, as I understand the complaint that I read just this morning, an entry he made into an offense report a couple of days after the raid took place.
He says Bryant is waiting for his opportunity to be heard as well. In downtown, Michelle Choi, KHOU 11 News.
The family of one of 2 people killed in the raid is pleased with these new charges.
Activists who work to change policies in the wake of the shootings also happy with what happened today.
Our Jason Miles is live outside the home where it happened. Jason, next week will mark 10 months since the encounter.
Yeah, that's right, guys. And this home has looked pretty much the same way since the weeks after this deadly raid. There are remembrances to both people who were killed here out front. And now we know one of their own neighbors is accused of making false 911 calls that helped lead up to that raid. Thanksgiving Day will mark 10 months since Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nichols died in their Harding Street home during a disastrous police raid. No one at this home just across the street wanted to speak about its connection. That's where Houston police say 58-year-old Patricia Garcia was arrested this morning for allegedly making fake 911 calls that helped lead to the raid.
As I've told this community before, we had reasons to initiate an investigation, and I think the fact that he was arrested today speaks as to the beginning of that investigation.
Garcia is accused of falsely claiming Tuttle and his girlfriend were drug dealers and that they had machine guns and other weapons inside their home. Community activist Hai Bowie recalls an encounter with her early on.
I came to her at the beginning asking the neighbors if I could do a vigil, and Patricia Garcia was very vicious. She said, "No, get the heck out of here. I don't want you guys here."
Bowie still can't understand why former HPD officers Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant allegedly falsified search warrants based on Garcia's phone calls in order to conduct the raid, which also injured a number of fellow officers.
So my question to you Houstonians, do you really feel safer right now? Do you really feel safe? I don't. I'm be honest with you, I don't. Because this could happen to any Houstonian. A neighbor make a call, false call, a police officer lie, and boom, you're dead.
An attorney who represents the Tuttle family sent a statement that reads in part, quote, "The family of Dennis Tuttle has suffered and is still suffering a long and devastating ordeal. They still have very many unanswered questions and are eager to see how this plays out in a court of law." Meanwhile, Chief Art Acevedo says the department is committed to making sure police operations are conducted appropriately.
Even if they had a ton of heroin in that house, we're still a nation of law.
And just within the last few minutes, I interviewed the son of Patricia Garcia's boyfriend. He owns the house in which she was arrested this morning. Hear what he had to say coming up at 6 o'clock. For now, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Jason, thanks. Tonight, a new development in the botched Harding Street drug raid. The 2 Houston police officers charged in the case were arrested by the FBI today.
They picked up Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant at their homes this morning, and this is our first look at the woman who was also arrested. Patricia Garcia lives in the neighborhood where the raid took place. Prosecutors say she made several fake 911 calls that led to the raid back in January, where 2 people were killed.
We have team coverage on today's developments. First up, Adam Bennett. He shows us what's in the federal indictment and what's next for the case. Adam?
Goines and that neighbor, Patricia Garcia, both head back to court Friday morning. But the judge gave Stephen Bryant a $50,000 unsecured bond. That means he can walk out of this building without paying a dime as long as he proves he has the assets. Goines is already facing state murder charges. These new federal charges are for allegedly depriving the victims of their constitutional rights. Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas were shot and killed inside their home on Harding Street during a no-knock police raid. Prosecutors say Goines falsely claimed both he and 2 confidential informants bought drugs at the Harding Street home. Bryant, like Goines, was charged with obstructing justice by falsifying records. Bryant pleaded not guilty to that one charge during the day's only arraignment.
It's basically the federal court equivalent of tampering with a government document. That's exactly what he's charged with in state court. So there's no new evidence, there's no new anything. It's just that the federal government decided to bring copycat charges against him.
Bryant faces up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Goines could serve up to life. And Garcia, the neighbor, she faces up to 5 years in prison if convicted. Now this afternoon, Goines' attorney told us she's not aware of any relationship between her client and Garcia. Reporting from downtown, Adam Bennett, KHOU 11 News.
The wife of a former Houston mayor is strongly defending the ex-police officer at the center of a botched drug raid on Harding Street. Gerald Goines pleaded not guilty today, and now a federal judge is deciding whether he will go free before his federal trial. He was arrested this week along with another former cop and a woman accused of making fake 911 calls that led to the raid. Adam Bennett is downtown with what both sides are saying.
Prosecutors called Goines a danger to the community and a flight risk. Their witness, an FBI agent, also shared new details about this case. He testified that homeowner Dennis Tuttle yelled, quote, "I told you there were no drugs here," just moments before being shot dead. Prosecutors say Goines lied about a confidential informant buying drugs at the house and falsified documents to justify the raid. Their FBI agent witness also testified that Goines later claimed he himself bought those drugs, but cell phone data shows he wasn't anywhere nearby. That agent also said that Goines lied on another search warrant days earlier at another home. That case allegedly involved a confidential informant in a long-time sexual relationship with Goines. After the Harding Street raid, the agent said over 20 pieces of drugs and a stolen weapon were all found inside Goines' work vehicle.
There's no evidence to indicate that there's any problem with his ability to remain on bond.
One key defense witness, Elise Lanier. She's the widow of former Houston Mayor Bob Lanier.
Well, I testified to the fact that I think Gerald is a very honest man of great integrity. He's a gentle giant. He's got a wonderful soul.
Lanier told me Goines still works for her and still will if he's granted bond.
He works for my whole family. We love him. We support him. We are here with him.
And the agent that issued Goines' bond and ankle monitor in his state murder case also testified today. She told the court that Goines has been 100% compliant, and she said she'd be willing to issue bond for him again in this case. Reporting from downtown, Adam Bennett, KHOU 11 News.
At noon, a former HPD officer arrested on federal charges from that botched drug raid on Harding Street will remain in custody for now. Gerald Goines' bond is set at $150,000. This was at this morning's bond hearing when the judge granted a motion of stay. That means he will remain behind bars until the next hearing. Goines is accused of violating the rights of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nichols against unreasonable searches and obstruction of justice. Both were killed in the January raid. Any appeal may not be heard this week.
I dream of this day for the holidays where my son would be here with me and my family. This is such a happy day for us. This is a real blessing for us.
Goines' wife and daughter left the court disappointed. If and when he is released on bond, Goines would be placed on house arrest and would have to comply with a long list of conditions until his trial date.
Also, the former police officer at the center of one of the biggest cases of police conduct in HPD history in the process of getting out of jail.
A judge decided to release Gerald Goines on $150,000 bond after he was arrested last month on federal charges.
Larry Siebert has more from the federal courthouse downtown Houston tonight. Larry?
Gerald Goines didn't pay a dime. His bond is unsupervised, meaning it's an I promise to show up for court, and it comes with an ankle monitor and freedom to plan his next move. He is almost home. Gerald Goines, the ex-cop who led a botched drug raid on Harding Street that killed Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle and wounded 4 Houston police officers. 8 days after catching federal charges for tampering, falsifying records, and violating the rights of the couple killed, a judge ordered Goines released. An unsecured $150,000 bond that cost no money to get out. But outside downtown's detention center, Goines' attorney, Nicole DeBoard, says her client's time here slowed efforts to sift through mountains of evidence being used against him.
Being able to go over that with a client is much easier when they can sit down at your office and spend time looking at it.
In January, officers burst into this home looking for guns and heroin. They did it based on 911 calls from a woman now accused of lying and a confidential informant Goines allegedly made up. 7 months later, prosecutors charged the 34-year veteran narcotics officer with 2 counts of murder. Former partner Stephen Bryant went to jail for tampering. Then last month, the FBI arrested both and the 911 caller. Federal prosecutors argued Goines was a flight risk. And after a week delay that kept Goines in jail on Thanksgiving, he will be home well before Christmas. A lawyer for Regina Nicholas's relatives sent us this statement tonight. Quote, the Nicholas family respects the court's consideration of all the issues in making a decision to permit bail. However, considering the terrible crimes of which Mr. Goines is accused, the Nicholas family believes the community is safer and the ongoing investigations better protected if he remains in jail pending trial. At the latest, Gerald Goines will be going home sometime tomorrow morning. We're live downtown. Larry Siebert, KHOU 11 News.
It's been almost a year since a Houston couple was killed in a shootout with police during a botched drug raid inside their home on Harding Street. Since then, former HPD officers Gerald Goines and Stephen Bryant, plus a neighbor who called 911, Patricia Garcia, have all been charged in the case. But Goines and Bryant have not been indicted by grand jury yet. Today, authorities visited the home once again as part of the next step of the case. David Gonzalez joins us now live. David, you talked to the district attorney today. So where does the investigation stand now?
Hey, Mia, yeah, the district attorney calls the Harding Street case very deep and also very complex, but they also say that a grand jury has been working on this case for the last several weeks.
To us and to our community, this is the most important case going on in the country.
The home at the center of the Houston police botched drug raid on Harding Street last January was once again taped off Wednesday morning by authorities. A large white tent covered the driveway, and around 10:15 a.m., a large black bus pulled up and dropped off a group of people. Their identities are unknown, but members of the Harris County District Attorney's Office were on the scene.
Because of the volume, we're taking the investigation in phases, and that includes phases of presentation to this grand jury and likely other grand juries.
Under Texas law, grand jury proceedings are secret, so District Attorney Kim Ogg can't confirm nor deny what exactly took place at the Harding Street home. The group was there for about 15 minutes before boarding the bus again. Ogg says there's no timeline as to when this phase of the case will wrap up, but plans on multiple grand juries hearing different parts of this case.
Everybody involved is under a prosecutorial microscope because our community needs to know why Harding Street happened.
And the district attorney says that the community should expect action and fairness as well. And they say in honor of the public's trust that they demand that this case take as long as it needs to in order to get the necessary answers. Back to you.
The former Houston police officer who is charged with murder in a botched raid was back in court today.
Gerald Goines is facing new accusations from an inmate he helped to convict in an unrelated drug case. The inmate now says it was the officer's lies that sent him to prison.
Jason Miles is at the criminal courthouse downtown with more details on this case. Jason?
Yeah, this is just one of thousands of cases tied to Gerald Goines now under review in the wake of the Harding Street raid, but just getting him to show up to court today was a challenge in itself.
Former HPD investigator Gerald Goines,
Mr. Goines, do you have anything to say?
who's already at the center of the botched Harding Street raid, is now the focus of Otis Mallett's quest to overturn a 2011 drug conviction.
In this case, a lawyer filed a writ on behalf of Mr. Mallett alleging false testimony by Gerald Goines and asking us for relief.
During a hearing today, the district attorney's office agreed that Goines provided false testimony and failed to disclose relevant evidence to prosecutors at the time, and that no reasonable jury would have convicted Mallett if they'd known what we know now.
What we're really concerned about is that an innocent person was framed and convicted, spent time behind bars, and has been on parole since.
Goines is currently out on bond for the murders of a couple killed in the Harding Street raid early last year, which was allegedly conducted based on erroneous and made-up information. He initially skipped this morning's unrelated hearing for medical reasons until a judge threatened a contempt of court charge. It later took seconds for him to plead the fifth.
He had surgery for being shot in the face during the incident that you are all familiar with, and there are a number of ongoing surgeries that require him to recover.
Mallett hopes to recover his good name, if not all the time spent in prison.
But we do really appreciate the court giving us the time today to prove that Mr. Mallett is actually innocent of this crime.
His case goes back the farthest out of the thousands that are now under review thanks to Gerald Goines' involvement.
And during today's court hearing, a prosecutor looked at Mr. Mallett and told him, quote, "I'm sorry, you deserve better." Although the DA's office at the time of his trial thought all of the information was factual based on what Goines said. Back to you.
Also breaking now, a grand jury has indicted 2 former Houston police officers for charges connected to that botched Harding Street raid that killed 2 people. The Harris County DA's office confirming former officer Gerald Goines was indicted for felony murder and tampering with a government document. Former officer Stephen Bryant was only indicted for tampering with a government document.
Tomorrow marking 1 year since the controversial drug raid at a Houston home that left a husband and wife dead, 4 officers hurt, 2 of them later charged. Grace White is live at Houston headquarters tonight with new information she's learned about this case. Grace?
The family of Regina Nicholas plans to file a motion in federal court tomorrow morning. They're hoping to unseal documents they think could be helpful to their case. She and Dennis Tuttle were shot and killed 1 year ago. Houston police narcotics officers were conducting a no-knock warrant at their home on Harding Street. 2 former officers have been charged, but the Nicholas family says this is just the beginning of their investigation. They want a federal judge to unseal documents related to another HPD case. It involves a man named Jordan Baker who was shot and killed by an HPD officer back in 2014. The city recently settled a $1 million lawsuit with his family.
There were several years of depositions, including of the chief of police at the time, that at this point we want to make sure that the families in our case as well as the public has a chance to see, because it might shed a lot of light on the practices that have been going on for years.
The Nicholas family attorney spoke at a community meeting tonight, saying the family wants more than just 2 officers to be held accountable for what happened. Tomorrow there will be a candlelight vigil on Harding Street, and again, we expect that motion to be filed first thing tomorrow morning. Mia, back to you.
A man sent to prison by a Houston police officer who is now facing a murder charge was declared innocent today. It's just one of thousands of cases connected to Gerald Goines now being reviewed after Goines was involved in a deadly drug raid last year. Jason Miles has more from criminal court.
You don't often see prosecutors and defense attorneys agree on something, but they did in this case, calling a man's conviction a miscarriage of justice. That man is Otis Mallett. He was sent to prison for 2 years nearly a decade ago on a drug conviction, something that was largely based on the testimony of former HPD narcotics officer Gerald Goines. That's the same former officer accused of lying about the reasons for last year's deadly Harding Street raid, during which homeowners Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas died. Thousands of cases tied to Goines are under review due to the possibility of false testimony or made-up evidence.
But Mallett's is the first one that has resulted in a judge declaring someone innocent post-conviction.
It's very important to the public trust that they understand not just why Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle were killed in their own home, but how far back Gerald Goines' corruption goes and what that means in terms of implications for others.
District Attorney Kim Ogg would not speculate on how many more cases may end up like this, but her office has already dismissed a number of pending cases in which Goines provided testimony. Mr. Mallett's innocence should be officially confirmed by the State Court of Appeals. His pastor spoke today saying that this was injustice, but at least things are now being made right. In downtown Houston, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
Well, he is accused of lying about what led up to last year's deadly Harding Street raid. Now the DA says even more unrelated drug cases tied to ex-officer Gerald Goines will be dismissed. But his attorney believes it's all a ploy to get votes and taint a jury. Jason Miles has the new details on this ongoing case.
Prosecutors say every drug case in which Gerald Goines was a major player over the last 11 years, quote, needs to be flipped. It's been nearly a year and a half since a couple were killed in a botched drug raid on Harding Street. But the fallout tied to former HPD officer Gerald Goines continues.
We're getting to the bottom and the depth and breadth of Gerald Goines' corruption.
District Attorney Kim Ogg says her office expects to dismiss at least 91 additional drug cases in which Goines provided sole testimony or played a key role going back to 2008. That's on top of 73 cases identified in February. They're unrelated to the Harding Street raid, for which Goines is charged with murder and other crimes.
We look forward to bringing the public additional facts about Harding Street, about the squad involved, and continuing the process of clearing people who've been wrongfully convicted.
But Goines' attorney, Nicole DeBoard, believes the DA's motives are anything but benevolent.
I think this is a purposeful effort by this district attorney's office to continuously put this case in the news for the sole purpose of affecting the way potential jurors would be able to receive actual data and actual factual information in this case. That's why she's doing this.
DeBoard says there's no reason to believe there's anything wrong with these old cases, despite the fact that Goines pleaded the fifth in at least one hearing related to them.
We believe that Mr. Goines' reputation is being tarnished by these allegations, which we believe to be false.
Prosecutors say all of the 164 cases now up for possible dismissal involve African American or Latino defendants, all of whom may not be innocent, but definitely worth a second look. While these old cases are scrutinized, Gerald Goines himself remains free on bond and under home confinement while awaiting trial. Back to you.
The families of the couple killed in the Harding Street raid are demanding transparency on the anniversary of the shootings. 2 years ago today, Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas were killed inside their home after Houston police carried out a faulty no-knock drug warrant. Now their families are suing in hopes of finding out what happened before, during, and after the deadly raid. Deva Gonzalez looks at what came out today.
We want answers. We're not going to quit till we get answers.
John Nicholas is on a mission to bring justice to his sister Regina and her husband Dennis Tuttle.
Chief Aceveda keeps saying we had a reason to be there. It's taken you 2 years to find that reason? Me and my mother would like to know.
The couple was killed inside their Harding Street home during a botched drug raid by a Houston police narcotics team. Regina's family has filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against HPD. They claim Squad 15 operated as a criminal organization and tormented Houston residents by depriving their rights to privacy, dignity, and safety.
This was the culmination of years and years of preying on our communities.
Mike Doyle, the family's attorney, says they've been given nothing but empty promises of transparency and accountability.
They've been put in a position where the only way we're going to get to the bottom or the top of what really is going on and continues to go on in this city and with this police department is by filing a civil action.
Doyle says The family's independent investigation revealed Regina was killed on her couch after she was shot by an HPD officer through the wall, and Dennis never shot at officers.
Chief Artis Veda today could release this ballistics information. He could release the facts, this physical evidence. He could do it today, and if he won't do it, the mayor could do it.
Mayor Turner says the city has policies and procedures in place for a reason, and that the lawsuit is going to run its course. But the Nicholas family calls it a cover-up. David Gonzalez, KHOU 11 News.
Former Houston police officer pleaded guilty in federal court today for his role in a botched drug raid. That raid killed a Houston couple back in 2019. David Gonzalez has the latest on today's developments.
Stephen Bryant faces up to 20 years behind bars for his role in a deadly raid at a home on Harding Street. Right now, he's out on bond until he's sentenced in August. On January 28, 2019, Regina Nicholas, her husband Dennis Tuttle, and their dog were shot and killed during a shootout with police. Bryant becomes the first officer indicted in this case to make a plea deal.
The family now has some hope that their efforts, and it's been a long fight that they're not going to stop, will hopefully start bearing some fruit, and they'll start getting some answers along with the rest of Houston.
Mike Doyle represents the Nicholas family. He says Bryant now has no reason not to cooperate and answer questions about what happened before, during, and after the raid.
And there's a reason why the physical evidence has been concealed or refused to be looked at. And getting the answers finally is starting to happen, and ought to happen quicker now with this person able to answer questions.
The original investigation determined former officer Gerald Goines lied to a judge to obtain a no-knock search warrant to raid the house, and other officers were involved in a scheme to steal overtime from the city. Bryant pled guilty to completing a report in which he falsely claimed to have assisted Goines in buying drugs at the home the day before the botched drug raid. Doyle says the Nicholas family just wants answers.
There are hours of body cam videos, and what we now understand, maybe video of while it was happening. The city has still refused to give up and conceal even now.
Bryant's attorney says his client very much regrets what happened. He said by making a plea deal, Bryant has taken responsibility for his conduct. We reached out to the Houston Police Department, but they would not comment because Bryant is a former employee and there are still criminal cases pending. In Houston, David Gonzalez, KHOU 11 News.
And new at noon, a man wrongly serving 25 years in prison will be freed today. His is the latest conviction, likely to be reversed after the botched raid on Harding Street that left a couple dead in 2019. Prosecutors say that case revealed a history of misconduct and fabricated evidence from the lead officer, Gerald Goines. Stephanie Whitfield has more on what happened in court this morning.
Frederick Jeffrey has been in custody for almost 6 years, and now both sides agree his conviction was based solely on false evidence. The district attorney's office says the evidence they have now shows disgraced former HPD officer Gerald Goines lied in an affidavit to get a search warrant in Jeffrey's case, then lied again under oath at trial about a key piece of evidence. Prosecutors say based on that fabricated testimony alone, Jeffrey, who was homeless at the time, was arrested in 2016, then convicted in 2018. Now an appeals court will take another look at the evidence in the case, and in the meantime, both sides and the judge agree Jeffrey should be released on bond as soon as possible. We talked to his mom outside the courtroom this morning.
I want to just praise God. I've been praising him. I've been praising since my son been in jail because I know he was innocent from day one. So I just my emotion is everywhere. Because I haven't seen my son in 5 years, almost 6 years.
She told us she spent years angry knowing her son was innocent, but today she's too happy to be mad. She says she plans to wait downtown for as long as it takes for her son to be released, which may be later today. She says first she's going to give him a big hug and then a big meal. In downtown Houston, Stephanie Whitfield, KHOU 11 News.
New tonight, a Houston man convicted on what is believed to be false testimony by a former HPD officer has been freed on bond. We were there tonight when Frederick Jeffrey walked out of jail after serving 6 years of a 25-year sentence for drug possession. The district attorney's office says that conviction was based almost entirely on the testimony of Gerald Goines. He's the disgraced officer charged with murder and organized crime. The DA says he falsified evidence and lied under oath to secure drug convictions in hundreds of cases. The district attorney's office believes Jeffrey's conviction was one of those cases.
Felt good because I knew from the get-go I was innocent. I just had to prove it. Well, God did everything for me. I ain't did nothing to stay down. And I thank God for keeping my mama by my side the whole time.
Yes,
I just want to say,
every day.
I thank God for just carrying me through. With that, I'm ready to go.
I'm going to eat something to eat.
You going to get something to eat.
I'm going to get something to eat.
That's it.
Whatever you want to eat. What you want to eat, baby?
Well, Popeyes.
Didn't I tell you chicken?
Jeffrey will remain on bond while the Court of Criminal Appeals reviews his case. Goines is still awaiting trial for his charges.
On now, new at 5, an emotional moment in a Harris County courtroom today. A man sentenced to decades in prison in a case tied to a key figure in the botched Harding Street drug raid walked free. A judge dismissed Frederick Jeffrey's 2018 drug conviction because prosecutors say it was based solely on Officer Gerald Goines' testimony. Adam Bennett was in the courtroom. Adam, Jeffrey had been serving a 25-year prison sentence.
That's right, Ron. Now, he had been on bond since July after all sides agreed that his conviction should be reversed. In September, the state's highest criminal court granted him a new trial, but today prosecutors said they had determined that Jeffrey is actually innocent of this crime. Frederick Jeffrey walked into this downtown Houston courtroom this morning with his case in legal limbo. Minutes later, he left with his case dismissed after a motion filed by the district attorney.
I am deeply sorry for what occurred to you. It never should have happened.
And granted by Judge Danilo Locayo.
I'm glad we were able to fix a wrong. If I can shake your hand, sir. Yes, sir. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Thank you, sir. If you ever need anything, give us a call, okay? Yes, sir. Be safe.
I thank God that my mom being in my corner. It just feel good to be finally free.
Jeffrey told me his faith and his mom got him through the nearly 6 years he spent behind bars since his arrest in 2016. Prosecutors say former Houston police officer Gerald Goines falsified information in a search warrant that led officers inside the home where Jeffrey was arrested.
We also determined that Officer Goines lied about a statement Mr. Jeffrey made about ownership of a cell phone that would have linked Mr. Jeffrey to the drugs in the house.
The DA's office has determined there are 162 convictions within an 11-year period based on Gerald Goines' word alone.
We are working with the Public Defender's Office to try to get as many of those appeals in as we can, and the District Attorney's Office has sent letters to all the individuals who we believe were affected by this.
It's the same notification Frederick Jeffrey got that eventually opened the door to freedom.
Just live life. Live life. Everybody else live life. What else is going to do? Live life. That's it.
Going forward, Jeffrey's lawyer says they'll consider whether to apply for compensation from the state or even whether to sue HPD. But for now, Jeffrey says he's looking forward to spending Thanksgiving with his girlfriend and his family for the first time in years. Ron.
Going to be a special Thanksgiving for that family. Thank you so much, Adam Bennett.
Gerald Goines, the former Houston police officer charged in the deadly Harding Street drug raid, was back in court today. Adam Bennett shows us why his lawyers are asking the judge to toss out the indictments and what Goines himself told us after court.
This morning, outside the 228th Criminal Court, Gerald Goines had this to say.
I just appreciate everything that the court is doing. I appreciate all the prayers that have been sent out to me. Thank you.
As for Goines' case, lawyers did all the talking inside the courtroom. The former Houston police officer is charged with murder and lying to obtain a no-knock warrant to raid a home on Harding Street back in January 2019. 2 innocent homeowners and their dog were killed, and 4 officers were shot and injured. Goines was later charged with engaging in organized crime in connection with an alleged long-running overtime theft by several HPD officers. Today, Goines' lawyers asked Judge Frank Aguilar to quash the indictments. Lawyers argued those documents don't spell out the specifics of the charges clearly enough.
We believe that these accusations are missing some very important portions of the law.
During the hearing, prosecutors claimed that argument doesn't hold up. They told Judge Aguilar they've turned over all evidence and information.
We are entitled to know exactly what what we're dealing with in terms of an accusation so that we can have the opportunity to have a fair fight in a court of law.
Judge Aguilar said he'll decide next Tuesday. That's also the date of a hearing on motions by the defense to dismiss for prosecutorial misconduct and to change the venue.
We believe that next Tuesday will be a very important day.
Prosecutors declined to comment after today's hearing. Adam Bennett, KHOU 11 News. This morning, outside the 228th Criminal Court, Gerald Goines had this to say.
I just appreciate everything that the court is doing. I appreciate all the prayers that have been sent out to me. Thank you.
As for Goines' case, lawyers did all the talking inside the courtroom. The former Houston police officer is charged with murder and lying to obtain a no-knock warrant to raid a home on Harding Street back in January 2019. 2 innocent homeowners and their dog were killed, and 4 officers were shot and injured. Goines was later charged with engaging in organized crime in connection with an alleged long-running overtime theft by several HPD officers. Today, Goines' lawyers asked Judge Frank Aguilar to quash the indictments. Lawyers argued those documents don't spell out the specifics of the charges clearly enough.
We believe that these accusations are missing some very important portions of the law.
During the hearing, prosecutors claimed that argument doesn't hold up. They told Judge Aguilar they've turned over all evidence and information.
We are entitled to know exactly what we're dealing with in terms of an accusation so that we can have the opportunity to have a fair fight in a court of law.
Judge Aguilar said he'll decide next Tuesday. That's also the date of a hearing on motions by the defense to dismiss for prosecutorial misconduct and to change the venue.
We believe that next Tuesday will be a very important day.
Prosecutors declined to comment after today's hearing. Adam Bennett, KHOU 11 News.
New at 5 today, a judge denied a motion by lawyers for former HPD officer Gerald Goines to dismiss the case against him.
Goines is charged with murder and lying to secure a no-knock warrant in a deadly Harding Street drug raid back in 2019.
2 homeowners and their dog were killed in the shootout that followed. 5 police officers were hurt. Adam Bennett joins us now live from the courthouse downtown.
And Adam, Goines' lawyers were also hoping to move the trial out of Harris County.
That's right, Lynn, though today the judge did not rule on that change of venue request. The defense argued that Goines is not going to be able to get a fair trial in Harris County because of the media coverage that this case has generated. But prosecutors argued that this county is large enough and diverse enough to find 12 fair and impartial jurors. Today, though, the judge ruled on that motion to dismiss the case based on prosecutorial misconduct. In the end, he ruled that the evidence was not strong enough to do so. Defense lawyers accused District Attorney Kim Ogg of trying to, quote, gin up public sentiment by pushing media coverage that defense lawyers felt was anti-Goines. They also pointed to anonymous posts and comments online made by Ogg's former communications director expressing negative opinions about Goines. But prosecutors argued that public interest in this case is what generated the stories. And they said the online comments made little to no impact. Going forward, though, both sides said they would be open to what's called individual voir dire. That's where potential jurors would be questioned one by one away from the rest of the jury pool.
I think it will be helpful with the complicated issues that this case presents to have that opportunity, and I believe all sides are in agreement that that is an appropriate path forward.
And the judge did mention that was a solution reached in the A.J. Armstrong murder trial earlier this week to keep that case in Harris County. After today's hearing, though, in the Goines case, prosecutors did not wish to comment. Goines' team told me that going forward, they'll be looking into documents just filed by prosecutors a couple days ago, alleging that more drugs and more guns were found inside that Harding Street home than what was previously made public. The next hearing will be held in 3 weeks. Lenamia.
Be interested to hear what evidence they do bring forward here. Adam, thank you.
Afternoon, Houston City Council voted to increase the amount they're paying defense attorneys in a lawsuit over the botched Harding Street raid. Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle were killed back in 2019 as HPD issued a no-knock warrant on their home. The victims' families have filed a federal lawsuit against the city and former police chief Art Acevedo. Today, City Council increased the pay by $1.7 million, bringing the total contract to nearly $3 million.
This weekend marks 5 years since the deadly Harding Street raid. Many people still want the officers involved in the deaths of Regina Nicholas and Dennis Tuttle held accountable. Our Troy Kless joins us outside of Houston Police Headquarters with more. Hey, Troy.
Community activists say that the raid still angers them, but they also say that it's frustrating waiting this long without any justice for the victims.
Families are still grieving today.
Families and friends of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas killed 5 years ago Sunday, and time has not healed those wounds.
The family, the mom is 90 years old. She is hanging on to bring justice for her daughter, Regina Nicholas.
KHOU and many others gathered across from HPD, the agency getting the brunt of the anger.
5 years later, no one's gone to trial on a serious felony charge. Gerald Goines is still out there enjoying his freedom.
Former officer Gerald Goines is charged with felony murder in the raid. He's accused of falsifying evidence to secure a no-knock warrant on a home in 2019. The raid ended in a shootout that killed the couple inside and several officers wounded. Another officer, Stephen Bryant, pleaded guilty to federal charges of falsifying documents. And just this week, the city of Houston approved an additional $1.7 million to defend itself and its former police chief from a federal lawsuit filed by the Tuttle and Nicholas families.
To quote a lawyer representing one of the families, why would you try to defend the indefensible? But that's what's going on.
Here we are, 2024. Activists say it's part of a history full of police-involved tragedies that shouldn't be left in the dark.
We are the people, all of my friends here and all that, we are trying to keep the name alive because the city wants us to go away.
But in the streets of downtown,
We're not going anywhere.
their calls for justice for the couple continue. Troy Kless, KHOU 11 News.
All new at 5 o'clock today, a judge set aside the felony murder indictments against a former Houston police officer accused of killing 2 people during a botched drug raid back in 2019. Gerald Goines faces several charges tied to that raid on Harding Street. The case could now face a long delay or ultimately be dismissed. And the Harris County DA's office says it may amend its indictment to continue the case.
Today, a former Houston police officer has been re-indicted on a felony murder charge.
Just last month, a judge set aside the indictments against Gerald Goines. Goines is charged with murder and is accused of lying to secure a no-knock warrant in the deadly Harding Street raid. 2 homeowners and their dog were killed in the 2019 encounter. 5 officers were hurt. Today, the Harris County District Attorney's Office confirmed with KHOU 11 News Goines has been re-indicted. And they, quote, look forward to getting justice for the victim's family.
Morning, we are following an update in the case of a former Houston police officer. Now, Harris County District Attorney Kim Ogg says she is grateful a grand jury re-indicted Gerald Goines on felony murder charges. We have followed this case against Goines for 5 years now, ever since he and other officers carried out a drug raid at a home on Harding Street that killed a husband and wife. Goines was later accused of falsifying records to secure warrants to carry out several bogus drug raids and arrests. Investigators say it was all part of a wide-ranging scheme to earn overtime pay. The district attorney's office was shocked last month when a judge dismissed the murder charges, but now a grand jury has indicted him again.
We feel confident that Gerald Goines will be brought to justice and that the victims in this case will finally have their story told. So we look forward to trial and we look forward to presenting our case so that the public finally can know what really happened at Harding Street.
Right now, we're working to learn when a trial date will be set.
A former Houston police officer charged with murder is due back in court. We've been following the case against Gerald Goines for the last 5 years, ever since he and other officers carried out a botched drug raid that killed a husband and wife. He's due in court at 9 o'clock this morning.
Starting tomorrow, former Houston police officer Gerald Goines will go on trial for murder. It's a result of the infamous Harding Street raid back in 2019. Goines is accused of lying to get a no-knock warrant approved that led to a shooting that left homeowners Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas and their dog dead. Goines and 4 other officers were also shot, but they survived. What followed was a massive investigation that discovered dozens of defendants were sent to prison on drug charges based on what prosecutors called, quote, lies by, quote, dirty cops.
In a matter of hours, the murder trial of a former Houston police officer is set to begin.
Gerald Goines is charged with murder following the botched Harding Street raid 5 years ago that resulted in the deaths of 2 people.
Our Ugochi Iloka is live outside the Harris County Criminal Courthouse with more on the charges against him. And Ugochi, it's not just murder charges.
No, it isn't, Steph and Ron. The former HPD officer Gerald Goines' trial is set to start in a few hours in connection to that deadly Harding Street raid in 2019. However, he also faces federal organized crime charges. Now, we know a massive investigation discovered that dozens of defendants were sent to prison on drug charges based on what prosecutors called lies by dirty cops. Now, in this specific double murder case from 2019, Goines is accused of lying to secure a no-knock warrant that led to the shooting that killed Dennis Tuttle, Regina Nicholas, and their dog. Now, officers were acting on a tip that turned out to be invalid, which means the no-knock warrant they were serving was allegedly fraudulent. Now Goines is being held responsible for their deaths, even though he didn't pull the trigger. Here's what the DA's office says about Goines' case.
We feel confident that Gerald Goines will be brought to justice and that the victims in this case will finally have their story told. So we look forward to trial, and we look forward to presenting our case so that the public finally can know what really happened at Harding Street.
Yeah, the district attorney's office told us that they had to reopen really hundreds of cases tied to Goines, including a 2004 drug arrest, a link to George Floyd in Houston. As many of you all know, Floyd's death in 2020 in Minnesota sparked massive protests across the nation. Now, we're following this trial for Goines. That begins at 9 a.m. this morning. We'll be covering that on TV and online on KHOU.com. Reporting live outside the Harris County Criminal Courthouse, Ugochi Iloka, KHOU 11 News.
All right, Ugochi, big day in court for sure.
And happening right now, former Houston police officer Gerald Goines is on trial for murder. This is all connected to that botched Harding Street raid where a couple was killed. Ugochi Iloka joins us live from court with details. Ugochi.
Sherman, right now witnesses are taking the stand in the murder trial of former HPD officer Gerald Goines. Now, we were just in the courtroom when opening statements were made in connection to the 2019 deadly Harding Street shooting that Goines is charged in. If you take a look, this is video inside the courtroom. We know in the prosecution's opening statements, they said this all started with a neighbor calling 911 saying her daughter was at the home of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nichols using heroin with a woman named Reggie. The neighbor demands police go in there and get her daughter. The state says the call was false and a daughter was never found there. Now, the defense argued in their opening statement the narrative around this case is fiction and blamed the cause of Tuttle and Nicholas's death on both of them, not Goines. They told the jury they will learn from the 911 call that there were drugs and guns found in the house. Goines is accused of lying about having a confidential informant check the house prior to the raid for drugs, lying about going to the house himself and getting drugs, plus more to secure a no-knock warrant that the state claims led to the shooting death of the couple and their dog, Star. Hear what both the prosecution and defense said about the alleged false information Goines gave.
The evidence will certainly prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Gerald Goines lied on that search warrant and that affidavit time after time after time.
You are not going to be happy with Gerald for some of the things that he said that were not true in that affidavit, and then later at the hospital.
Yeah, Goines and 4 other officers were shot during that no-knock warrant. They survived. Of course, Tuttle and Nicholas did not. Now, the defense argues that the couple did not follow police officer commands. The prosecution says otherwise. We'll be following this for you on KHOU 11 on TV as well as online, so stay with us. Reporting live in the Harris County Criminal Courthouse, Ugochi Iloka, KHOU 11 News.
All right, a big case much of Houston has been watching over the years. Thank you, Ugochi.
And 6:33 in just a few hours, day 2 of the murder trial will start for former Houston police officer Gerald Goines.
He's accused of lying to get a no-knock warrant, which led to a deadly shootout at a home 5 years ago. Ugochi Iloka joins us live outside the Harris County Criminal Courthouse with the new details we've learned of the trial so far. Ugochi, more witnesses are expected to take the stand today.
Yes, Ron and Steph, they are. And this morning, some witnesses, including law enforcement officers that were involved in former officer Gerald Goines' investigation, will share their testimonies. Now, separate from this murder trial, Goines is accused, along with 12 other narcotics officers, of scheming to generate overtime. Take a look at your screen. This is video of inside the courtroom just yesterday. We were there, and in opening statements, prosecutors told jurors that Gerald Goines lied repeatedly about investigating a home on Harding Street for 2 weeks in order to receive a no-knock warrant executed by Goines. Now, prosecutors said this all started with a disgruntled neighbor calling 911, demanding officers get her daughter from the home of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nichols, where she was using drugs. That neighbor is now serving time in federal prison for lying about it. In the end, the couple was killed in a shootout with police during that 2019 raid, and 5 officers were injured, including Goines. Now, the defense argues the couple died because they didn't follow police officer commands. The prosecution argues Goines' lies caused all of this.
You will learn from that Texas Ranger that this shooting by Gallegos and these officers was justified.
Gerald Goines tells Sergeant Bass, okay, I lied about the CI, but I went and I made a purchase at that house. I bought heroin. Well, he didn't know when he was lying through his teeth that the phone records would prove impossible.
Yeah, and the prosecutor there also says, he went on to say that Goines also allegedly asked one of the officers to plant drugs after he was caught lying about having a confidential informant. Now, we also know that Goines faces federal organized crime charges. In fact, the DA's office says they had to reopen several cases linked to Goines. Reporting live outside the Harris County Criminal Courthouse, Ugochi Iloka, KHOU 11 News.
Happening now, day 2 of former HPD officer Gerald Goines' murder trial. It is underway. He is accused of lying to get a no-knock warrant, and that led to a deadly shootout at a home off Harding Street in 2019. Devon Raming joining us live from outside the Harris County Criminal Courthouse, where several witnesses are testifying today. Devon.
Well, Sherman, cross-examination of one of the state's witnesses, a Houston police officer, is underway as part of this trial, which has been 5 years in the making. Now, Goines is accused of lying to secure a no-knock warrant for a drug raid that led to the shooting deaths of Dennis Tuttle, Regina Nichols, and their dog at their home on Harding Street in 2019. In opening statements yesterday, prosecutors told jurors that Gerald Goines lied repeatedly for 2 weeks about investigating the home in order to receive the warrant executed by Goines. Legal experts say a felony was committed during the raid and that the officers were acting on a tip that turned out to be invalid, calling the no-knock warrant fraudulent. The defense argues the couple died because they didn't follow police commands. The prosecution, though, argues Goines' lies caused all of this. Goines is being held responsible for the deaths of Tuttle and Nicholas. Even though he didn't pull the trigger that day, he, along with 4 other officers, were shot, but they all survived. Now, Goines is also facing federal organized crime charges, and the DA says they've reopened several cases linked to him. Live in downtown Houston, Devon Rahming, KHOU 11 News.
All right, thank you, Devon. A case Houston is following.
Body cam video shown in court today in the murder trial of former HPD officer Gerald Goines.
Yeah, Goines is accused of lying to obtain a no-knock warrant on a home, and that raid ended with the couple in the home shot and killed.
Jason Miles is at the criminal courthouse downtown. He's got the details for today. Jason?
Hey there, guys. Let me remind you and the audience that cameras are not allowed in the courtroom at this point in this trial. We can cover the opening statements, the closing, but really nothing in between. But I can tell you that body camera footage you mentioned, complete with shouting, the sound of gunfire, even moaning, just one of the exhibits that came up today. Take a look at this video, though. This is what we shot in the hallway. This defendant there, former HPD narcotics officer Gerald Goines, seen during one of the breaks today. He is charged with murder in the deaths of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas, both in their late 50s. The married couple, along with their dog, were killed in early 2019 after officers burst into their home using a no-knock warrant Goines secured. Prosecutors say that warrant was based on lies, though, by Goines, portraying the couple as dangerous drug dealers. However, the defense pointing out today that other drug evidence was found inside the home, along with several weapons. Some of those weapons also shown to the jury today, but a detective who investigated the shooting testifying that there was no evidence of a drug operation inside the home. A community organization called We the People Organize sprouted from this incident more than 5 years ago, and representatives are among those attending this trial day after day.
So we decided we would make sure that these people would get justice. So we're here representing the families. They can't be here, you know, so we can. And so here we are, and hopefully something good will come out of the trial.
That detective who investigated this shooting today testifying that there was no evidence of unlawful use of force when the raid went down, something defense drilled down on, as you might imagine. But prosecutors contend the Tuttles were simply defending themselves against whoever was bursting into their home at the time, not knowing, according to prosecutors, that those people were actually Houston police officers. Now, last week, one of Goines' attorneys admitted her client did lie when it comes to that search warrant that led to this raid, but said his actions do not merit under any circumstances a murder conviction. Now, the next witness on the list happens to be a Texas Ranger who did some of the ballistics testing in this case. He was waiting in the area near where we are standing. He was just taken into the courtroom, but we anticipate the trial ending for the day anytime now within the next few minutes. It is expected to last at least 4 weeks in total. Reporting live downtown, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
The trial underway 5 years after that raid. Jason Miles, thank you. Arguments expected tomorrow in the murder trial of former HPD narcotics officer Gerald Goines.
Goines is accused of lying to obtain a no-knock warrant, which led to the deadly Harding Street raid. Jason Miles has the latest from Harris County Criminal Court.
Legal wrangling over jury instructions took up most of the day today. The jury will receive instructions in the morning, followed by closing arguments. Then comes jury deliberation. This is video of defendant Gerald Goines arriving to court this morning with his attorneys and family by his side. He's accused of lying to secure a no-knock search warrant back in 2019. That raid, as you might recall, ended with the shooting deaths of couple Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas, along with their dog, at a home on Harding Street. 4 officers, including Goines, were also injured. Charges the jury will receive include felony murder for each death and tampering with a government record. The first time, many recall, that being an underlying crime in a felony murder case, including KHOU legal analyst Carmen Rowe.
You better believe this jury is going to struggle with difficult areas of the law in reaching a determination in this case. And I think we can all anticipate that it's going to be a couple of days of deliberation for them.
Prosecutors argued during this trial that Tuttle and Nicholas might still be alive if Goines had not lied on a search warrant. However, his defense team said despite the fabrication, the couple were drug users, refused to comply with commands, and one of them even reached for an officer's weapon during that deadly raid. There is a gag order in effect for this trial, and cameras have not been allowed in the courtroom for most of it, but the camera will be allowed back in for closing arguments, and again, we anticipate those to begin sometime tomorrow. Reporting from the Criminal Justice Center, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
The jury is deciding the fate of Gerald Goines. The former HPD narcotics officer is charged in connection with a no-knock police raid on Harding Street that left a couple dead.
Yeah, the jury is deliberating murder charges against Goines more than 5.5 years after the shooting. Jason Miles live from the criminal courthouse tonight with more on today's closing arguments. Jason?
Well, as you guys know, closing arguments are when both sides get to summarize their cases before the jury retires to deliberate, and today a standing room only crowd came to hear those arguments. On the second day of the third week of his murder trial, former HPD narcotics officer Gerald Goines listened to closing arguments, as did a courtroom packed with people.
No one is above the law.
Prosecutors argue that Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas would still be alive if not for a fabricated no-knock search warrant Goines whipped up, fooling officers who raided the house on Harding Street with him and taking the unsuspecting couple by surprise.
Being entrusted to protect our community as a police officer does not give you license to violate someone and their rights simply because you think they use or they deal drugs.
The defense pointing out that other drug evidence was found inside the home, along with several weapons, and that Dennis Tuttle shot 4 officers, including Goines, and another simply trying to pull his injured partner to safety.
Tuttle, standing in the open doorway as close as I am to you, looks at that officer and shoots him in the face.
The defense team admitting their client lied to get the search warrant, but that his actions do not merit a murder conviction. Goines is also on trial for tampering with a government document. Here are the last words from both sides before the jury began deliberations.
Folks, this case is simple. We just ask for your signature on that final chapter. We ask you to end this today. They have not met their burden. Find Gerald Goines not guilty.
And the former officer faces 5 years to life in prison if convicted of felony murder, 2 to 10 years if convicted of tampering with a government record, that is, lying on that search warrant. Reporting live downtown, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
A former Houston police officer, Gerald Goines, is found guilty of murder.
It is one of the rare times an HPD officer has been convicted of murder. Jason Miles is live downtown with more on the verdict and what's next. Jason?
Hey there, guys. Yeah, this trial lasted about 2.5 weeks, took the jury to decide Gerald Goines' fate. After about 7.5 hours of deliberations between yesterday and today, he himself could spend anywhere from 5 years to life in prison on each felony murder count. Gerald Goines appeared to say wow as Judge Veronica Nelson read the same verdict for 2 separate counts.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Gerald Goines, guilty of felony murder.
The former Houston police narcotics officer found responsible for the deaths of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas nearly 6 years after their shooting deaths in the botched 2019 raid at their home on Harding Street. Goines never fired a shot, but admittedly lied on a search warrant that led to the raid. 4 officers, including Goines, were injured.
I'm surprised this jury came back as quickly as they did. But I also think that it sends a clear message that they returned so quickly on 2 felony murder charges.
KHOU legal analyst Carmen Rowe believes the jury obviously had a clear understanding of the state's case, despite the defense's attempt to paint the victims in a negative light.
I think that the sentence in this case is going to be just as clear from this jury.
Perhaps illustrating some of the tension following the verdict was this dust-up between deputies taking Goines from the courtroom and one of his defense attorneys. The same jury will return in the morning to begin the penalty phase. And members of the Tuttle and Nicholas families embraced following word of this verdict this afternoon. Of course, they also have civil litigation pending related to the Harding Street raid. None of the major players, the defense, the prosecutors, family members, can talk at this point because there is still a gag order in effect until after the sentencing phase, again, which begins in the morning. Reporting live, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
And we'll be back at the courthouse tomorrow a.m. Jason, thank you. Case begins tomorrow for former HPD officer Gerald Goines.
Yeah, Goines was convicted on felony murder charges today after he fabricated evidence to secure a bogus drug warrant. That warrant led to a raid and shootout back in 2019 that left a couple dead in their home. Matt Doherty has new reaction tonight to how quickly the jury reached the verdict and what we can expect tomorrow. Matt?
Nobody directly involved with the case was allowed to speak with us today. The judge's gag order won't be lifted until after the punishment phase. That begins tomorrow. If convicted, the former officer could spend the rest of his life in prison. It took the jury 7.5 hours to convict former HPD narcotics officer Gerald Goines for the murders of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas back in 2019, even though the policeman never fired a shot. Goines admitted he lied to obtain a no-knock warrant for the Tuttle's home, which led to a shootout between the couple and Houston police. Tuttle, Nicholas, and their dog were killed. Several officers were also wounded.
I'm wearing purple because this is Regina Nicholas' favorite color, and it's good luck.
Hi Bowie is the founder of the group We the People Organize, which he started 5 years ago in response to the botched Harding Street raid.
To be honest with you, I didn't think this day would happen.
Bowie went to every day of Goines' 2.5-week murder trial, taking notes to document what he believes to be a historic moment in Houston's history.
What happened to Tuttles could happen to anyone in Houston. You know, what Goines did was just totally wrong.
Bowie says his work will continue even after Goines learns his punishment.
It's a systemic problem. It's not one apple.
Whenever there's a guilty verdict for law enforcement, we tend to say one bad apple. We've had one bad apple too many times.
Harris County Precinct 1 Commissioner Rodney Ellis says Goines' verdict makes it clear that it's time to take a hard look at law enforcement accountability and the policies and procedures that guide officers' use of force.
A review to come up with a model use of force policy. And then it's up to each department to adopt it.
Although there aren't any at the county level, the city did pass a use of force policy following the Harding Street raid. HPD officers are still allowed to execute no-knock warrants, but now each one must be personally approved by the chief of police. Now, the sentencing phase could be lengthy. That's because it could include unheard allegations of misconduct by the officer that weren't allowed to be presented to the jury during the trial.
Today, the sentencing phase continues in the case of a former HPD officer convicted of murder.
Gerald Goines faces up to life in prison. Jason Miles spent the day in the courtroom. He joins us live from downtown with a recap of today's proceeding. Jason.
Hey there, guys. Today happens to be the former officer's 61st birthday. Among those testifying on his behalf as character witnesses, Gerald Goines' wife, his daughter, his sister, a former supervisor, and the widow of a former Houston mayor. Take a look at this video shot in the hallway earlier this afternoon. This is Elise Lanier, who was married to former Mayor Bob Lanier. She told the jury today she first met Goines back in the 1990s and that he later became basically part of the family while helping care for Mr. Lanier as his health declined. She described Goines as a gentle giant who'd do anything for anyone. The former officer's sister said he was the family protector all through the years, who dedicated his life to serving the public, despite some mistakes along the way, she admitted, including lying on the search warrant that led to that infamous no-knock raid that ended with the murders of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas back in early 2019. 4 officers, as you recall, were injured, including Goines himself.
This defense case is all about mitigation. It's all about letting this jury know that Goines was a good son, that he's been a loving friend, and that he's been supportive in his community, so that they hope they will give him a lesser sentence as a result.
On the flip side, the state called family members of Tuttle and Nicholas devastated by the violent circumstances of their deaths. In fact, Tuttle's son, describing him to the jury as pro-police, describing his dad, that is, and said characterizations that his dad purposely shot officers the day of the raid are, quote, absurd. KHOU legal analyst Carmen Rowe, who you just heard from, believes the jury will not deliberate for very long once they actually go into the deliberation phase of this sentencing phase of the larger murder trial. That's because the jury only took about 7 hours to convict Goines again on 2 counts of felony murder last week. Cameras not allowed in the courtroom right now until the closing arguments and the actual sentence announcement. In just a few minutes ago, I can tell you that the defense rested. The state called one more rebuttal witness. So we anticipate this could wrap up today. Closing may be happening tomorrow. We will, of course, continue to cover this trial on air and online. Reporting live downtown, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
Jason detailing the very full day in court for us. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I'm Sherman Chow. Just in dramatic moments this morning in the sentencing phase in the Gerald Goines murder trial. Former HPD narcotics officer had to be removed from the courtroom for what appeared to be a physical or a health issue. We have brand new video of Goines leaving the courtroom, being assisted out, and then later being put into an ambulance. We can report that the jury was immediately removed, as this happened in the middle of the state's closing argument. Goines was convicted last week of 2 counts of felony murder. This nearly 6 years after a couple was shot to death during a botched raid on Harding Street. That was based on a search warrant that Goines admittedly falsified. That is him being put into an ambulance this morning. The resulting scandal resulted in federal and local probes into HPD's narcotics unit, its police cases, and overturned 22 convictions. Goines facing 5 years to life in prison for each felony murder conviction. Stay with KHOU on air and online for updates.
Former HPD officer convicted of murder is in the hospital tonight. Gerald Goines had an apparent medical emergency in court this morning during closing arguments in the punishment phase of his trial. Jason Miles was in the courtroom at the time. He is live tonight with more. Jason.
Hey there, Lynn. Yeah, one of his lawyers told the jury today during this sentencing phase that Goines was a broken man in bad health well beyond his 60 years. He didn't have that apparent medical episode that abruptly ended the sentencing phase, at least for the time being. Take a look at video from inside this courtroom. The only clip, in fact, we're allowed to share per the judge's orders. Goines appeared to slump over before his team and bailiffs eventually walked him out of the courtroom. His family immediately reacting, as did others in the courtroom. EMTs were called to the criminal courthouse, came up here to the 14th floor, hooked Goines up to all kinds of devices, then wheeled him onto an ambulance outside. While some skeptics may question the timing of this medical episode, KHOU legal analyst Carmen Rowe says people facing a potential life sentence often experience severe stress and anxiety. That's on top of any other pre-existing conditions that might exist.
And I think that these health issues will definitely impact the jury in as much as they did witness some portions of it. Whether or not that translates into a change in what they would ultimately give him as a punishment, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Goines faces from 5 years to life on each of 2 felony murder convictions related to that 2019, Harding Street raid, which was, as you may remember, based on a bogus search warrant Goines obtained, and he admitted to fabricating. His defense team continuously telling the jury today that they should judge Goines on the whole of his life and contributions to the community rather than this unfortunate incident nearly 6 years ago. Now, the prosecution was in the middle of recapping their case, calling Goines corrupt, etc., when he had that apparent medical episode. The plan right now is to resume the proceedings on Monday morning, but all of that obviously is fluid depending on how the former officer is. Reporting live downtown, Jason Miles, KHOU 11 News.
Ongoing developments in this long case. Jason, thank you.
Thank you. This morning, closing arguments in the sentencing phase of former HPD officer Gerald Goines are set to resume.
Goines is expected to be back in court after suffering an apparent medical emergency last week. Devon Rahming live outside the courthouse downtown. Devon, is Goines still in the hospital this morning?
Reka and Steph, good morning. We are still working to find out if Goines has been released from the hospital. Sentencing is set to resume at 9 o'clock this morning, but his attorney tells us that Goines, he is a broken man and is in bad health well beyond his 61 years. Now take a look at this video. This is video from last week when Goines had to be ushered out of the courtroom, abruptly ending the sentencing phase of his trial. He appeared to slump over and had to be wheeled out on a stretcher. His family immediately reacting along with others in the courtroom at the time. And while some may question the timing of this apparent medical episode, KHOU 11 legal analyst Carmen Rowe tells us people often facing a life sentence experience severe stress and anxiety, which could exacerbate any other pre-existing conditions.
And I think that these health issues will definitely impact the jury in as much as they did witness some portions of it. Whether or not that translates into a change in what they would ultimately give him as a punishment, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
Goines has been convicted of 2 felony murder convictions in connection to a 2019 botched drug raid at a home on Harding Street in response to a search warrant that Goines obtained and admitted to fabricating. This led to the deaths of Dennis Tuttle, Regina Nicholas, and their dog in their home on Harding Street. Now, Goines is facing anywhere from 5 years to life in prison. In downtown Houston, Devon Raming, KHOU 11 News.
Right now, we are awaiting a decision on a punishment in the murder trial of former HPD officer Gerald Goines. The jury has been deliberating now for hours, but any moment now they could return a verdict. Goines was found guilty on 2 counts of felony murder in connection to the 2019 Harding Street raid. Stephen Goines joins us live from criminal court with the details for us. Stephen?
Mia, the jury has been in deliberations for 5 hours and counting, but still no update. The last thing the jury heard this morning was closing arguments by the state. Now, as prosecutors were speaking, take a look. Goines was there in court after experiencing a apparent medical emergency last week. On Friday, he was taken away in an ambulance right after the defense had wrapped up their closing in the punishment phase. Goines' defense team argued the jury should judge him on the whole of his life and career, not just the Harding Street incident. But today, prosecutors encouraged the jury to not be, quote, manipulated, claiming Goines had exhibited a pattern of corruption for years. Take a listen to those final statements.
The deaths of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas exposed how he bastardized the great honor of that badge that he held, how he, without any sort of regard for human life, took actions that we noticed from 2008 he had been doing all along.
Now, you'll remember that couple, Tuttle and Nicholas, they were gunned down during a 2019 raid at their Harding Street home, which was based on a bogus search warrant Goines obtained with false information. Goines will be sentenced for his role very soon in their deaths. We know this former officer could face 5 years to life, and we expect to find out sometime this afternoon what that sentence will ultimately be. We're live today in Harris County Criminal Court. Stephen Goines, KHOU 11 News.
Calls numbers 1862491 and 1862492. We, the jury, having found defendant Gerald Goines guilty of felony murder, assess his punishment and confinement in the Institutional Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 60 years and assess a fine of $10,000 signed by the foreperson of the jury. And cause numbers 1862492. We, the jury, having found the defendant Gerald Goines guilty of felony murder, assess his punishment and confinement in the Institutional Division of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice for 60 years and assess a fine in the amount of $10,000 signed by the foreperson of the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, similar to what we did before, we're going to poll you. It's going to be numbers that we're going to mention. If this is your true and accurate verdict, say yes. If this is not your true and accurate verdict, please say no. Again, with 34, I believe the number is, and we'll say 34 foreperson. Okay? All right.
Juror number 1?
Yes.
Juror number 8?
Yes.
Juror number 16?
Yes.
Juror number 22?
Yes.
Juror number 34?
Yes.
Juror number 52?
Yes.
Juror number 94?
Yes.
Juror number 108?
Yes.
Juror number 67?
Yes.
Juror number 34, foreperson?
Yes.
Juror number 72?
Yes.
Juror number 80?
Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, for the final time, I don't have to give you the admonishment, but I will be back to formally excuse you from your jury service.
All rise for the jury.
Please have a seat.
Yes, correct. Okay. She'll do that. Six right. Six.
Jury, having found you guilty of the offense of felony murder, is there any legal reason as to why the court should not impose that sentence?
There is not, Your Honor.
Having no legal reason at this time, the court will honor the jury's verdict, sentence you to 60 years in the Texas Department of Correction. We'll give you credit for all the time that you've been in. At this point, you will be released to the Sheriff's Office, until which time they will transport you to the Texas Department of Correction. I assume at this point, the defense has gone over his appeals rights with him and has signed a certificate.
We have not gotten the signatures yet on that, but we're in the process of doing that, and we'll turn those into court shortly.
At this point, is it your inclination to stay on the case as attorney, or will you be withdrawing?
We will remain on the case, and he does. We will be filing our notice of appeal today.
Yeah, and in fact, the Harris County District Attorney calling this the most significant verdict in Harris County, that none of the lawyers involved could remember a previous time when a local police officer had been convicted of murder in Harris County.
For 60 years?
It took 5 years for this case to close. Family and friends of Dennis Tuttle and Regina Nicholas appeared somber and satisfied.
Justice is messy. In the end, I have more faith than ever in our justice system.
The Tuttle and Nicholas families do remain angry with public officials who had wrongly labeled Dennis and Regina as drug dealers.
And we would expect a public apology, exonerating them, and for their quick, uneducated verdicts on innocent civilians.
DA Kim Ogg said Goines and his narcotics team were
worthy of the movie Training Day. He had throw-down weapons. He had throw-down drugs. He killed and was responsible for the deaths of these two people and the ruination of many, many more.
The hope now that this case helps combat police corruption.
If it's happening in Houston, it's happening everywhere.
You know, Martin Luther King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." The jury got it.
As for Gerald Goines, the ex-officer, once a huge bear of a man, is now bent and thin.
Yeah, I saw a broken man.
There were people who tried to urge the Tuttle and Nichols families not to go, quote, against HPD. Obviously they did. Mr. Tuttle saying today this was about going against the bad cops. Live here at the Harris County Criminal Justice Center, Sherman Chow, KHOU 11 News.
Sherman, thank you. And right now on KHOU 11 Plus, we have a thorough, complete timeline of how we got here, starting with that botched raid in 2019 to today's sentencing, almost 6 years later, streaming right now on KHOU 11 Plus.